Our heroine's mother died during her honeymoon with her second husband under mysterious circumstances. The flame-haired woman slapped the blonde in the face. Despite the funeral, she asked how the girl dared to come here. The heroine's face was distorted with pain and resentment, and tears flowed down her cheeks. The Duke of Arbat was her mother's next husband. The blue-eyed beauty listened to insults addressed to her, and tears welled up in her eyes. Initially, the girl came here to make her mother happy. Unfortunately, her relationship with the Duke did not work out, but after the tragedy, she had no need to stay here. For a moment, Ophelia remembered how her mother, getting into the carriage, promised to return soon. But the woman was never able to fulfill her promise. A little more than a month has passed since the baby arrived in the duchies, and soon she will have to leave him. Ophelia's mother was born into the family of an ordinary peasant in a small village. Since childhood, she had incredible beauty, and she didn't fit into the environment around her at all. Our heroine remembered how her mother said that her grandfather said that money is the most important thing in life, and so he decided to sell his daughter to a 30-year-old landowner. Ophelia gently combed her mother's hair and listened carefully to the story. The woman told her daughter that she did not want to spend her precious life in such a wretched place. After this event, my mother ran away from home under the cover of darkness. A mercenary who was passing through their village helped her in her escape. Then they proceeded to a small town in the south where they later settled. Ophelia appeared soon after. It was probably not in vain that they said that happy endings only happen in fairy tales. For as long as the skinny girl could remember, Mom and Dad were constantly fighting over lack of money. But one day my mother, having packed her things in a suitcase, took Ophelia by the hand and they ran away, taking advantage of the opportunity that her father was in a neighboring city for work. The girl's mother looked like a butterfly. After all, you just had to touch her and she flew off into the distance. Ophelia was always afraid to let go of her hand. Despite their family connection, their relationship was cold and unclear. The little girl was afraid that if her mother was unhappy with her, she would leave her like her father. The girl was very afraid that her mother would leave her. When the family left the port city, they went north with all their belongings. The longer the journey, the less money they had left. Ophelia's mother even had to sell the ruby ring that her husband once gave her. And soon after that, the girl heard about the death of her father, who died while suppressing the riots. Widowed women found it difficult to earn a living. Soon Ophelia's mother fell in love with a noble knight, but a few years later, my stepfather unexpectedly died of sepsis. The girl remembered how her mother insulted him. At this time, the woman became friends with the Baroness, whom Ophelia's stepfather served, and she came to her senses quite quickly after the loss. The girl's mother supported the Baroness, and her name was Blanche. She was in poor health. Blanche happily accepted Ophelia's mother as her companion. Soon both women began attending noble evenings of aristocrats together. It was not surprising that the young, beautiful widow often attracted men's gaze. The Duchess whispered in the woman's ear to tell her if she liked someone, but unfortunately, only one person came to mind for Ophelia's mother. The woman carefully examined Baron Blanchet with her piercing blue eyes. However, the man was already married, albeit for convenience. But soon his wife fell ill at the resort. Every day, the Baroness became weaker and weaker. The Baroness's last wish was for her friend to take care of her husband. Soon after the funeral, the girl's mother married Baron Blanchet. People whispered that the woman was friends with the Baroness just for this reason. People around discussed such a quick wedding after the funeral. Soon after the death of his ex-wife, the Baron, previously in full health, began to weaken before his eyes. When Ophelia was 19 years old, the Baron fell from his horse and died. The girl remembers how her mother hugged her tightly with tears in her eyes. The woman did not understand what was wrong with her and why all her husbands died. When all the mourners had left, Ophelia and her mother mourned in their own words. Suddenly, a man approached them and asked to accept his deepest condolences. This was Hertz Arpat, who was a friend of Baron Blanchet. The Duke stayed at the estate to help their family after the funeral. Ophelia sometimes saw her mother walking with Arpad in the garden together. At first, the couple was embarrassed to even hold hands, but after some time they hugged without the slightest hesitation. The woman gently pressed the Duke while standing in the garden. Beautiful pinkish-white flowers bloomed all around. The man looked out from his carriage and opened the door with a creak. Ophelia asked her mother if she would go to the Duke. The girl clutched the hem of her dress tightly. She couldn't believe this was happening to her again. When the carriage departed and the mother's gaze fell on the baby, She realized that her mother would soon become the Duchess of Arpat. Before sunset, the scandal around the woman had already died down, and then the family went to the Duke. They were on the road day and night. The carriage wheels creaked. Ophelia looked sadly out the window. The woman told her daughter that the previous Duchess died shortly after the birth of her heir, and that soon she will take the place of that one. Mom asked Ophelia why she looked unhappy. The girl clutched the hem of her dress tightly, smiling artificially. The baby explained that if Mom is happy, then she will be too. Soon they arrived at the Duke's palace. The gates were open, hospitably inviting guests into the luxurious estate. The man told his beloved that he missed her very much. The Duke also greeted Ophelia courteously. As she got out of the carriage, the girl heard whispering. The servants discussed that the woman who had arrived had already buried 3 husbands. Drops of cold sweat ran down the girl's face. The girl got off the carriage and hesitantly stepped onto new lands. Some very young guy said that he was very pleased to meet you. Ophelia flinched in surprise. She carefully examined the boy, whose voice had not yet broken. He looked like a statue carved from ice. He called Ophelia his sister and asked how she got there. The guy introduced himself that his name was Alexander. Then our heroine met him for the first time. It was amazing how the woman advanced from the daughter of a commoner to the wife of a mercenary. Ophelia was surprised at how tall the Duke's son was. She extended her hand to Alexander and said that she was pleased to meet him. The guy shook the outstretched hand in a friendly manner and asked to speak to him less formally. It was something surprising and joyful for the girl that she had a brother for the first time. The boy looked at her with interest at his new sister, and suggested that she communicate with him on a first-name basis. A woman with fiery red hair ordered the girl to get out of here now. She swung it hard and hit her in the face. Alexander intercepted his hand, preventing the next blow. The guy asked why the woman attacked his stepsister. Later, he explained that his sister suffers no less than a woman. She was infuriated that he had just called the girl his sister. The Duchess ordered him not to utter such nonsense again. The woman reminded him that the girl had not even been accepted into the family yet. She rudely pointed her finger at the blonde. Taking a break from mourning, people began to whisper. Ophelia smiled and thought that they shouldn't whisper, because soon she wouldn't be here anymore. The girl removed her brother's hand from her shoulder and ran towards the exit. Alexander called out to her, but the girl was not going to stop. Ophelia closed the door behind her with a bang. Tears slowly flowed down her face. She wanted to at least be at her mother's funeral to the end, despite the fact that no one needed her in this house. But it was her mother. The girl didn't care that her mother's happiness was more important than her child. Ophelia tightly covered her mouth with her hand so that no one could hear her sobs. If she had known in advance that everything would happen like this, she would not have followed her mother. Now the girl has no one left. She sat down under the door, buried her face in her knees, and cried from powerlessness to change anything. The girl went outside the palace at night, shuffling through the snow. She gently stroked the brown horse's face. The noble animal snorted contentedly. Having thrown all her things onto the horse, Ophelia was going to ride far from here. But then steps were heard behind her. The brother asked where she was going to go for the night. The girl was surprised to see Alexander. She was surprised by his question where she was going, and I was at a loss for how long he had been standing here. Ophelia has already made the decision to leave here, but her brother grabbed her hand tightly and asked where she was going, and didn't say a word to anyone. She asked to be let go because she did not have much strength. Alexander continued to hold the blonde's hand. He told her no. The girl involuntarily shuddered. She asked why the guy didn't want to let her go. Ophelia asked her brother to name at least one reason, and he said that even if he wasn't tired of her yet, that was no reason to keep her here. The blonde insisted that she had the right to know. The boy explained to Ophelia that without her there were no adults left in the house. He also warned that it would be unsafe for her on the road alone. The girl asked how she, coming of age, felt about the boy's house. The girl explained that his relative was right, and she had no right to be called by the surname Arpad, because she had not even been accepted into this family yet. The guy asked if it mattered now. He proposed to resolve this issue immediately, but the girl immediately refused his proposal. Looking into her brother's eyes, the girl explained that he was already an adult and should not behave like a small child. Ophelia tried to free her wrist, but Alexander's hand squeezed her more and more. Hot drops of tears fell onto the snow, running down the guy's cheeks. Ophelia was surprised that he was crying. Reaching out her hands to her brother's face, the girl began to caress his cheek. assuring him that she had gotten excited. The guy apologized and explained that he was very afraid of being alone. And he said that he was surprised when he unexpectedly learned that he would have a new mother and sister. He admitted that he was happy about this event. Alexander said that he didn't even have time to really get used to it when his father and mother suddenly died. The guy explained that he felt abandoned. Ophelia looked at him with understanding and sympathy. The girl thought that she had felt those same emotions just recently. The feeling of loneliness and the realization that she had no one left brought them together in mutual grief. The brother said that he could not get away from the idea that he was left alone in this world. The girl hugged Alexander, holding him tightly to her. Tears slowly flowed from the orphaned children's eyes. Before this, the girl thought that if she left the house, it would also be better for her brother. Ophelia explained to him that she did not feel welcome here. The guy admitted that this was true, and initially he was very unhappy. Then he was greatly offended that some girl turned out to be older than himself. Alexander remembered how infuriated he was that his father ordered him to call the girl his elder sister. The girl pinched his cheek. The guy, without wasting a second, immediately apologized to her. He asked the girl to go into the house because it was very cold outside at night. The girl went to stable the horse. The guy asked her not to leave the house again without saying a word. The girl explained that she would not do this, explaining that she was only staying here because her brother kept her. Ophelia realized that if she continued to live in the Arpad estate, bad rumors could spread. She explained that although in the eyes of society they are brother and sister, but only a month has passed since she appeared here, and I didn't see any point in staying here anymore. The guy didn't let Ophelia leave. Despite the fact that she had been here for barely a month, he managed to become attached to her. He asked if she considered him a brother. Alexander took the girl to the estate and explained to her that he understood that she did not like it here. Ophelia asked what the guy wanted from her. "Keep your eyes on the floor." The guy said that he wants her to stay here until he becomes a full-fledged duke. The girl apologized and explained that he would become an adult in 3 years. But she did not intend to sit here for so long. The guy promised that no one would touch the girl here again. He offered her his care to make Ophelia feel comfortable. The girl did not understand whether the duke had always been like this. The guy didn't look like himself at all. After all, before, even when there was great need, he had not behaved like this. And Ophelia agreed, but she warned that she had one condition. If after 3 years she wanted to leave unexpectedly, her brother would not stop her. That night, the girl did not yet know that he was trying to keep her in the dukedom because of the real reason. The man apologized to Alex for being late. The duke's son explained to Uncle Arian that he was trying his best to make it in time. But unfortunately, I missed the funeral. The uncle was surprised to see the girl here. The man noticed that she had to go through a lot in her life. Extending his hand to her, the man asked to remember her name. After shaking the man's hand, the girl introduced herself as Ophelia. Cassie wondered if she was a waste of space to the man. The man laughed and said that Cassia was also beautiful. The man noticed that he was much more attracted to this young lady. The brunette said that recently he has been busy looking for a bride. Alexander instantly pulled his uncle back. The heir asked if he had come to Arpat to look for his wife. Adrian said that he first got into the carriage for a different reason. The man noticed that one did not interfere with the other. Clapping her hands, the elderly woman explained that it was enough for them to argue about nothing. The woman suggested that Alex go to the greenhouse because today the weather was sunny. The woman understood that the guy was worried. Tristram was no longer there. The woman with gray hair promised that she would stay in the estate and help him with his business. Alexander thanked her for her concern, but he had his own opinion on this matter. The woman coldly noted that the heir turned out to be very busy, and they discussed this issue among themselves. Cassie asked if she could move to another room. The woman drank tea calmly. Cassie noticed that the guest room was very far from the dining room. The girl asked if it was possible to occupy the room opposite Alexander's room. Cassie remarked that it would be great to see each other more often. The guy explained that he appreciated the offer. He noticed that there was no need to bother so much. The girl promised that he would not disappear with them. The woman nervously tapped her fingers on the table and explained that there was not a single adult in the house. The woman noted that it is necessary to give the floor to elders. The heir asked how it was that there were no adults. He recalled that his older sister Ophelia was with him. Cassie was furious at this statement. She slammed her hands on the table and shouted at the heir. Now Ophelia understood why her brother asked her to stay. The woman explained to Alex that at his age it is worth listening to elders. The guy once again thanked them for coming to lend him a helping hand. He recalled that the servants in the house suffer greatly from their kind hands. Women often beat and abused servants. The guy noticed that just today 5 maids went on sick leave. Peering at the women with his cold eyes, the guy asked a question. He didn't understand how women could help Arpad if they weren't even able to control themselves. Cold sweat rolled down the relative's cheeks. By the next morning, the house was empty. Alexander wished Ophelia good morning. The girl was sitting with a cup of tea in her hands. The guy was surprised that the girl was still walking around like that. The heir noticed that the injury on his sister's cheek was much more serious than it seemed. The girl touched her cheek. Confused, she replied that there was nothing wrong with it and that she would apply ice later. Alexander asked the girl when this would happen. The heir had been looking at his sister's bruises since yesterday. The guy recalled that there was medicine in his room. He suggested going there. The guy led Ophelia along the luxurious corridors of the castle. The girl was surprised that he would let her into his room, and he opened the door and invited me to enter. The blonde was flooded with memories of how she came to him at a late hour. Then she heard that he was sick and brought him herbal tea. Then the guy was surprised that she could unceremoniously look at someone else's room like that. And he asked me to learn some manners. Alexander asked his sister if everything was okay. For Ophelia, this was surprising, because just 2 weeks ago the guy was hostile towards her. It was unusual for the thin woman that the heir had become so kind. When the guy opened the box, the sister noticed that there was a diary there. Alexander was embarrassed when the girl noticed this. The brother asked not to tell anyone about this because it was not a man's occupation. The guy covered the desk drawer with his hand. Smiling, the girl tried to explain that she had no one to tell. The brother warned Ophelia that this medicine would burn a little. He clicked open a small black box. The guy carefully removed the hair from Ophelia's face. He was surprised at how soft her hair was. The heir admitted that this is the first time he has touched such soft female hair. He compared the girl's hair to thin threads of a spider's web. Confused, the girl explained that first of all, she was his sister. The brother gently dipped his finger into the ointment. The brunette asked the girl for permission to smear her bruises. The girl realized that every time she looked at him, she thought about only one thing. She could not help but admire Alexander's beauty. Dark hair, snow-white skin, a face devoid of flaws. Without realizing it, she often watched him. Ophelia pulled back her snow-white hair, exposing her damaged cheek. The heir promised that he would apply the ointment carefully so that it would not get on his hair. The girl thanked her brother and was about to leave. The guy touched her hand and pulled her sleeve. He was surprised that Ophelia was already leaving. The blonde admitted that her brother scared her. The guy apologized and explained that it happened unconsciously. The girl asked to be careful because after all, he was a man and she was a woman. At these words, the guy shuddered nervously. The heir explained that a moment ago the blonde was saying that she was a sister, not a woman. The blonde was very pleased that her brother listened to her carefully. Nervously braiding her hair, the girl explained that she was biologically a woman. Ophelia thanked her brother because she did not expect him to show such concern. The guy suggested that she take a jar of ointment with her. My brother said that the medicine should be applied after washing. He explained that the ointment would help get rid of the bruise in a short time. The girl explained that she was grateful for his generous offer, but was forced to refuse. After all, this was enough for her. The girl's pigtail flashed in the doorway. The door closed with a creak, leaving Alexander completely alone. The guy replayed the memories in his head again, remembering how his sister a few moments ago reminded him that he was a man and she was a woman. The guy tightly squeezed the jar in his hands. It seemed to him that his head was spinning and that he was going crazy. The girl was sitting on the windowsill and looking out the window. Each time he looked at Ophelia, he found more and more differences between her and her mother. The blonde missed her mother a lot. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock on the door. A charming maid came into the room and greeted the mistress. The maid asked permission to clean Ophelia's room. The girl noticed that there was no snow today and the weather was beautiful outside. The servant asked if the lady wanted to take a walk in the fresh air. The girl remembered how everyone used to whisper. Many were sure that she would not stay in the mansion. Unfortunately, she was not even included in the family register. She remembered that before that, not a single maid had thought to speak to her. The maid offered to go to the greenhouse. Ophelia was stunned when she saw her uncle again. His eyes sparkled. The girl was sure that the man had left. He explained that he had not been to Arpad for a long time. The uncle said that he decided to stay a few more days. The man explained that he did not intend to meddle in the affairs of the duchy. Ophelia realized that she shouldn't have come here. He suggested that they take a walk together. The girl realized that he was unpleasant to her. She knew that the Count was Alexander's closest relative. Unfortunately, Ophelia was in no position to refuse. She took the man's arm. Arian asked if he could address the girl as you. The Duke asked Ophelia if she remembered what he said last time. Arian explained that he heard that the girl became an adult this year. The man, smiling, asked if the blonde considered him a good candidate for a husband. He promised that the girl would never regret marrying him. She involuntarily clenched her fist. After all, I didn't understand how a relative could turn his tongue to offer such a thing in difficult times. The man explained that he needed 3 healthy sons. Arian promised that he would not ask her for anything else. The girl clutched the book tightly in anger. She couldn't understand how he could persuade a girl 20 years younger to become his wife. Luckily for Ophelia, the doors suddenly swung open. A maid ran through the door. The maid explained that Mr. Alexander was looking for his sister. This was something strange for the girl, because her brother never sent anyone for her. Ophelia asked where he was. The man wanted to stop the girl. Arian reminded her that she did not have to go immediately as soon as she was called. The maid explained that the young master ordered the mistress to be called immediately. The upset Duke allowed the girl to go. When Ophelia arrived at the appointed place, she was very surprised. The brother wiped away beads of sweat with a snow-white towel. The guy was surprised to see his sister, and the heart began to beat much faster. It was unexpected for the skinny one to see his brother without a shirt. Ophelia noticed that the heir had an excellent body. The girl felt embarrassed because she had just voiced her thoughts out loud. She asked Alexander to forget this incident. She asked why he was looking for her. The guy couldn't understand what his sister was talking about. Alexander was confused as to why she would take this on. Ophelia explained that the news was given to her by a blonde maid with short hair. The guy put his hand on his neck, rubbing it, and explained that he did not remember the names of the maids. The blonde guy reminded the gentleman that it was time to start training. Alexander explained that he had to go already. The heir assumed that the maid was mistaken. The guy whispered in his sister's ear that he was glad that she saw him without a shirt. Smiling, Alexander went to training. The girl thought about Alex's words and tightly clutched the hem of her dress. She wondered how serious her brother's words were. The maid with short blonde hair asked for forgiveness. The maid admitted that she had deceived her mistress. Ophelia asked why the maid did this. Startled, the maid said that she saw the frightened expression on the girl's face when she was washing the windows. The maid said that she wanted to help the lady. Ophelia quickly grabbed the liar's hand. The maid explained that they realized that they had made a mistake. The maid begged to forgive her this time. The mistress placed a jar of cream in the servant's hand. The girl's green eyes sparkled and she asked what it was. Ophelia asked to apply this to her hands. She explained that by this act the maid saved her from a difficult situation. A smile appeared on the maid's face, because she had not had such a high-quality cream for a long time. Ophelia was surprised that the maid once already had one. The girl muttered something, trying to explain herself. Wood was crackling in the living room fireplace. Ophelia explained that if the maid didn't want to, she didn't have to talk. The lady asked the maid what her name was. The girl introduced herself as Henrietta. Ophelia stood at the window and looked thoughtfully. She remembered the maid's words. The girl leaned her hand against the glass and thought about why Henrietta saw fear. She looked out the window and suddenly realized that from here she could hardly see the gardener. And then she recognized him only by his hair color. The girl did not understand how the maid could see the expression on her face. Ophelia entered the library and began looking for a book. The blonde ran her hand along a row of many publications. Thanks to the rich history of the Arpat family, many rare items were gathering dust in the library. The girl's gaze fell on one of them. She realized that it was a book of spells. Ophelia began flipping through the pages of that book. It was a surprise for her to find this publication. For some reason, the girl was sure that the Arpads would not buy such books. Unexpectedly, the blonde heard a sound. Turning to look at him, she realized that it was Alexander. It was a surprise for Ophelia to see her brother here. She didn't understand why the guy was sleeping here, and one of the books was lying on his face. The girl carefully reread each page with spells. She didn't even notice when her brother approached her. Alexander noticed that his sister was completely focused on reading. The girl did not hear the moment when her brother managed to wake up. Ophelia explained that the guy slept like a baby. He lowered his eyes shyly. He explained that he was very tired today. Looking through her book, the girl asked her brother if he had come across an interesting copy. Alexander said that she was incredibly interesting. According to its plot, the hero initially received humiliation and then began to commit murders. The brunette thought that the author's language was a little ordinary. At the end of the book, the hero died at the hands of a very busy character. Ophelia realized that the description alone had thrilled her from the first line. The publication was called A Man Who Tore His Mother's Womb Apart at Birth. Alexander asked what his sister was thinking about. The girl tried to understand what thought her brother was asking about. Ophelia slammed the spellbook shut. She explained that if she herself had not read this volume, she could not judge it. The girl explained that judging by the story, the book was terrible. She put the volume on the table and stood up. The brunette asked if she was already going to bed. The blonde explained that it was already time, and her throat had been dry for a long time. The guy asked his sister to stop. After ringing the bell, Henrietta entered the library. The girl asked why the young master called her. Ophelia realized that she had already seen this maid. The gentleman asked Henrietta to bring something to drink. For a few moments, Ophelia remembered that her brother had assured her that he did not remember the names of the maids. Now she knew that her brother was lying to her. The guy asked to bring something stronger. The girl watched her brother and the maid. She realized that they were both lying to her. Within a few moments, there were dishes with alcohol on the table. Ophelia asked whether Alexander would become ill from the intoxicating drink. The girl was worried about him, because her brother was still a minor. The brunette explained that he often drank alcohol with his father. The brother promised Ophelia that he would take just a couple of sips. Alex didn't want his sister to worry. The girl realized that the redness under the guy's eyes was most likely due to alcohol, but she didn't say it out loud. The blonde realized that she needed to quietly leave and go to bed. The girl addressed her brother by name. The heir asked to call him Alex. The guy explained that his sister had been here for several days. Ophelia looked at her brother in surprise. Alexander explained that it was time for her to stop calling him by his full name. The girl noticed that lately Alexander had been trying to get closer to her. She put the cup on the saucer. The girl apologized and explained that she was not yet ready to address him that way. After the girl left, the maid bustled around clearing the drinks from the table. The guy was surprised by his sister's answer. For Ophelia's sake, he squeezed out tears. Grinning, the brunette realized that his sister was not as simple as he initially thought. The guy looked into emptiness with his faded eyes. He did not pay any attention to the maid fussing around him. The gentleman turned to Henrietta and asked why she allowed herself extra. The maid's heart began to beat wildly. Falling to her knees, the girl explained that Mrs. Ophelia was very lonely. Henrietta understood that if Mr. Adrian found out. The maid's speech was interrupted by the gentleman. He wondered if his uncle would force his sister to do this. The maid answered positively, shuddering. The guy noticed that this girl was different from her mother. Alexander realized that his sister did not interfere with men and did not want to depend on them. This trait of the girl made life very difficult for the heir. He understood perfectly well that no matter how friendly he was towards Ophelia, she would push him away more and more. It was as if she was drawing a line between them that did not allow them to approach her. Alex opened the curtains and looked out at the snow-covered yard. The guy understood perfectly well that the girl was not so stupid. She once tried to leave secretly in the middle of the night. But the guy didn't understand why Ophelia wasn't afraid to stay on the street. Breaking away from his thoughts, the gentleman turned to Henrietta. Alexander put his hands on his hips. He asked the maid to know her place and not to cross the line. Covering her mouth with her hand out of embarrassment, the girl agreed with the young master. Her heart was beating wildly, echoing in her ears. The bright rays of the sun illuminated the castle. Ophelia heard a knock on the door. The maid greeted and said that the gentleman was inviting the girl to share a meal with him. She asked if she would join. Without taking her eyes off the book, the girl asked me to tell you that she was not hungry. Henrietta looked at her mistress and pulled out as if trying to say something. The maid explained that she heard that the girl had not yet personally chosen a maid. Ophelia explained that she was not very comfortable being catered for in everything. Sighing, the maid explained that the girl needed someone if she wanted to take a walk. The mistress cut off the maid's speech. Ophelia explained that she had a favorite maid, and they once chatted for a long time about everything while sitting in her room. Henrietta was very surprised that the maid came into the girl's room. The blonde with green eyes asked how close they were. The lady explained that there was nothing to admire here. because the next day her ruby necklace disappeared. Then her mother sent that maid away. Soon the necklace was found. But despite the fact that the girl asked to return the maid, her mother could not be convinced. Ophelia asked the maid if she had been standing for too long. The girl reminded that Alexander was waiting for her. The maid hurriedly left. Henrietta promised to return when she conveyed the girl's answer to the gentleman. The girl allowed the maid not to return. Alexander explained to his sister that skipping meals is a bad habit. He entered the girl's room. The guy told his sister that his uncle was staying at the estate for another night. He asked if his sister would mind. The girl tried to say something. The guy muttered that he was not happy either. Alexander extended his hand and offered to join him for dinner. Henrietta told the master that the lady had chosen her as her personal maid. Alexander looked at the maid with his calm gray eyes. Sitting on the bed, the girl thought that she had not chosen it yet. The guy asked if the girl really wanted him to congratulate her on this. The girl could not understand what kind of atmosphere there was in the room, because she felt like a third wheel. Trying to justify Henrietta, Ophelia said that she appointed her as her personal maid. A small trembling went through the guy's body. The girl gently touched her brother's hand. Alexander tried not to look at the blonde so coldly. Ophelia suggested going. It seemed to her that Count Adrian was already tired of waiting. Looking into the girl's eyes, the guy agreed with her. The brunette took his sister's hand. He explained that he wanted to hold her hand, intertwining their fingers. Alexander asked if the girl was against it. Not having time to receive a positive answer, he offered to go. Ophelia turned around and saw Henrietta continue to stand. Her green eyes were watery, and her hands were tightly clutching the hem of her dress. The rays of the midday sun illuminated the castle. Ophelia was sure that Adrian would not languish in anticipation. When the girl and her brother entered the kitchen, their uncle gave them a dissatisfied look. The man asked why they were so late. Not paying attention to the guests' rudeness, Alexander noticed that Adrian was extremely hungry. The uncle pointed out that it would be disrespectful to the chef to ignore a carefully prepared dish. Alex reminded the guest that he had promised to leave his property after the meal. Gritting his teeth, the man replied that that was what he had planned, but now he was inclined to stay. After these words, the cutlery in the girl's hands began to tremble. The heir turned to his uncle, but he interrupted him. The man explained that he knew what the guy wanted to say and asked him to look around. The man extended his hand towards Ophelia. He explained that he did not want to leave when such a charming young lady lived here. Adrian reminded the guy of his aunt's words. The woman said that the guy was still too young to manage everything here on his own. Carefully hiding his aggression, the guy explained that he and his sister Ophelia could handle everything themselves. Grinning, the man reminded the guy that she was an uneducated hillbilly and could not know about managing the estate. Unless, of course, there is a man next to her who can guide her. Alex couldn't resist and hit the table with his fist. He explained to his uncle that he allowed himself too much. Then the man asked Ophelia's opinion. Lowering her eyes, she said that she agreed with her brother. The man hit the table with his fist and asked the girl to speak directly. He asked why he didn't suit her as a candidate for husband. The girl calmly continued to eat. With sparkling eyes, the blonde answered His Excellency that age and appearance were playing against him. Alex couldn't help but laugh. The man raised his tone and asked his nephew what was funny about it. Gritting his teeth tightly, the man explained that he was fed up with Ophelia's arrogance. Adrian asked if the girl really imagined herself to be part of the Arpad clan because she found shelter here. Looking at the impudent man, the girl recalled that he was a distant relative of the Arpad family. The man suddenly jumped up from the table. He called the blonde an impudent wench. The man stabbed the knife into the table with all his might. Without losing his calm, Alex explained to his relative that he had just crossed the line. The guy reminded the guest that this was not his property. Alexander explained that he was no longer going to tolerate this. Brunet said that he knew about his uncle's walks during which he was looking for something. The man looked at his nephew and asked what he was talking about. The man explained that he did not like his nephew's tone at all. He began to tell me that young people in his time. The guy snapped his fingers and the maid handed him a gilded book. Ophelia watched this with interest. Adrian said that his dear nephew had allowed himself too much today. The guy calmly put the book on the table and asked to explain. Alex asked how the Arpad's account book ended up in his uncle's room. The guy calmly handed him the book. The man, shuddering, asked if the book had really been found in his room. The Duke began to make excuses that this could not have happened. The uncle assumed that he was simply brazenly set up. The man assured that he had never even seen this book. The guy moved the book closer to the man. Adrian didn't understand how it could end up in his room. The man turned to Ophelia. He assumed that the girl definitely knew something. The Duke reminded the girl what they were talking about. Cold beads of sweat ran down the man's face. He recalled how he told the blonde that he was not interested in the wealth of the duchy. Shaking the wine in her glass, the girl assured that she remembered everything. She understood what conversation the man was referring to. Alexander realized that he was hastily trying to grab a thin straw. The guy glared at the guest with his cold, ashen gaze. Adrian looked pleadingly at the girl, but she averted her sky-blue eyes to the side. The blonde replied that she could not remember what His Excellency was talking about then. Adrian chose the wrong person. The man did not take the book. He did not steal it. Ophelia knew this very well, because she herself threw it to the man when he was sleeping. Having pulled the tablecloth onto the floor, the guest called it rubbish. The cutlery fell to the floor with a crash. Adrian shouted that he proposed to the girl only out of pity for her. The man accused her of daring to set him up. The girl asked what exactly offended His Excellency. She maintained that she had done nothing wrong. Alexander ordered his uncle to be taken away. The servant bowed and accepted the young master's order. The girl stole the book last night, when scatterings of cold starlight shone behind the castle. One day Ophelia saw Henrietta enter the office. While no one was there, the blonde sneaked there unnoticed. After the death of the Duke, entry into the office was prohibited to everyone except Alexander. But still, this did not stop the girl. The creaking of the door broke the night silence. In the office, there hung a luxurious painting, and there were many valuable papers and books. The girl quietly entered the room. Her hair shone silver in the darkness of the night. Looking at the long bookshelves, Ophelia realized that the book she needed must be somewhere nearby. The girl didn't have to spend much time searching. She took one of the books and began leafing through it. Ophelia, looking at the pages, realized that she had finally found what she was looking for. The girl realized that there were mere little things left. Sneaking into the sleeping Adrian's room, she quietly slipped him notes. The cutlery clattered to the floor. The man wondered how the girl dared to look down on him. Ophelia believed that the Count was too cruel. She reminded the man that he had previously expressed a desire to take her as his wife. The man, losing his voice, shouted that he wanted the girl to admit that it was her doing. The heir noticed that his uncle was trying to discredit his sister. The Count accused his nephew of dancing to the girl's tune. Adrian made the argument that he raised the guy from an early age. Ophelia thought that it was good that the mansion was so huge that there was no one around at this early hour. Alexander said that the Count was leaving and ordered the gates to be opened immediately. The servants held back the man who wanted to be listened to. The guy asked to wait. Adrian said that his nephew made the right choice. The man asked him if he felt that something was wrong here. Alex calmly replied that the carriage in which his uncle arrived belonged to the Duchy of Arpat. The man shuddered convulsively, looking at his nephew. The butler confirmed that everything was correct, and that it was the carriage in which Lady Catherine traveled to Lassus several years ago. The gentleman replied that the property must be returned. The uncle asked how he was able to get home. He assured that it would take a whole week to travel on horseback to his property. The nephew suggested that Adrian would certainly find a way out of this situation. A barely noticeable malicious smile appeared on the guy's face. The man promised that he would return the carriage as soon as he returned to Lassus. The guy calmly waved goodbye to him. The man was taken by both arms. The butlers pulled the uninvited guest out of the castle. Adrian, in a panic, begged for an answer. Soon the castle gates slammed behind the man. Finally, Ophelia could enjoy peace and quiet. The gentleman asked the butler not to disturb them. The gray-haired man bowed and left the room. Alexander asked what his sister's motive was. His cold gray eyes pierced the girl right through. The brother asked why Ophelia did this. The skinny girl shuddered and asked what her brother was talking about. The brunette noticed that he couldn't get the truth. Then he took something out of his jacket. He placed it in front of the girl and explained that he found it in his office. The blonde noticed in horror that he had taken out an ash-silver hair. Alexander suggested that this was not part of his sister's plans. But she made one small mistake. He noticed an ashy hair on the carpet. The brunette realized that he had taken Ophelia by surprise. There was deathly silence in the room. Alex looked at his sister carefully, not understanding what she would answer next. The girl was surprised and asked how her hair could be found in the office. The guy shuddered at such an unexpected answer. Smiling, Ophelia replied that this could not be. She was calm and supported her head with one hand. The girl assured that the office was always closed and there was no way she could get there. She asked the guy if he was the only one who had access there. The guy clenched his fist tightly. He hated it when the girl paused at the end of her sentences. Her soft, enveloping voice seemed to bind the air with chains. This feeling arose even in their first meeting. The moment Ophelia left the carriage, surrounded by an ominous atmosphere, she seemed to lead all the troubles of this world with her. From the first meeting, Alex wanted to squeeze the girl tightly in his arms. She interrupted his thoughts and addressed him formally. But at the same moment the girl corrected herself and called him Alex. The guy shuddered. His hand clenched into a fist and shook violently. When he realized that the girl called him Alex, he tucked his hair behind his ear and the girl asked him to tell her the truth. Ophelia asked, throwing a cold glance at the guy. Did he really find her hair in the office? Looking at his sister, Alexander did not understand what kind of expression she had on her face. The girl had unshakable confidence in her every word. The guy's heart beat even faster. He was stunned that he had made a mistake. The future heir tried to convince himself that there could be no mistake. After all, he saw it with his own eyes. Without fear, the girl reminded her brother that there was another person there besides her. The blonde recalled that before her brother made his accusations, she had no idea what they were talking about. Sighing, the brunette agreed with her. Alexander realized that the girl would not deceive him. It was strange to him that not a single person in the mansion entered the office without his permission. Ophelia asked why her brother doubted her. Taking a glass of wine, she asked if he really believed that his servants could not do this. Not understanding what the girl was hinting at, Alex asked what she was trying to say. Avoiding a precise answer, Ophelia asked her brother to think carefully. Alex mentally assured himself that he could not forget the recent events. The guy remembered how, despite the girl's protests, he treated her in his room. Also immersed in memories, he remembered how they met in the library, where both had practically never been. The guy remembered how unexpectedly the girl came to him during training. With horror, the brunette realized that Ophelia was looking for him that day, although at that moment he could not even understand what was being said. With a start, the guy realized that Ophelia came to him that day because of Henrietta. The gentleman called the butler. The man asked what the young master needed. The gentleman ordered to call Henrietta immediately. Alexander asked the maid about the account book. Was the girl involved in this? The servant answered in the affirmative, and she said that she found it in Count Adrian's room. The guy sighed and explained that this was not what he wanted to ask her. She asked the maid for forgiveness, not understanding what was being said then. Looking at Henrietta, the guy asked if she was just pretending to be a fool or really didn't understand. The gentleman said that the maid had long ago lost his trust. The guy plunged into memories of how his father introduced him to Henrietta. The girl was the daughter of one of her father's friends. The father informed him that the girl would live in their house. Then the boy asked if the blonde was sure that she would not go to the academy. Henrietta had great potential and could become a great magician. Then the girl was only the daughter of a fallen aristocrat. Henrietta was happy to stay with him as a servant. The father could not understand why the girl chose to work as a maid, instead of the opportunity to study at the academy. But Alexander realized everything from the very beginning. One day, a girl invited the young master to spend the night together, coming to him in her underwear to seduce him. Alex knew perfectly well what feelings the maid had for him. He still remembered her deep eyes, revealing lace lingerie, and the shawl thrown over her shoulders. The guy turned to the servant, causing her to tightly clutch the hem of her dress. Alexander explained that he would not tell her all the details, and was sure that she did not need it. Since Henrietta was assigned as a maid to Ophelia's room, getting the girl's hair and placing it in the office was as easy as shelling pears. The guy asked why she went towards the estate for which she was not responsible. He couldn't understand why the servants went to Adrian's bedroom. In a trembling voice, Henrietta explained that the gentleman was talking about a shortage of workers. Alex asked if she really believed that there were not enough workers at the Arpad estate. The girl shuddered convulsively. In a trembling voice, Henrietta asked if the young master really didn't believe her. Trembling all over and whimpering, the girl explained that she was not lying. The guy was very annoyed by the behavior of the maid. They were very uncomfortable that Ophelia was watching this. His sister just started calling him by his partial name. Alexander was afraid that after this situation she would not even look at him. The hope that they were about to get closer to her was fading. Ophelia glared at her brother with her sky-blue eyes. The master ordered Henrietta to leave them. The guy decided to talk to her later when he calmed down a little. He slammed his hand on the table. Ophelia asked permission to leave first. The blonde explained that she was already full and didn't want to sit here in vain. My brother noticed that she didn't even touch the main dish. The girl explained that she had a hearty breakfast and headed towards the exit. The brunette noticed that his sister had lost a lot of weight since she moved here. The guy promised that he would control his sister's meals. Confused, Ophelia explained that she shouldn't do this. Touching the maid's shoulder, Ophelia asked not to scold her so harshly. The girl assured that she understood the maid perfectly, and she believed that anyone would make excuses in her place. Streams of tears ran down Henrietta's face. With surprise, Alexander asked if his sister stood up for her. Ophelia plunged into memories associated with the ruby pendant. Then her personal maid sobbed and assured that the young lady hid the pendant to frame the maid. Then the girl felt nauseous. She knew it was a lie. The servants themselves hid the jewelry, deciding to punish the spoiled girl. She was sure that Ophelia was mocking all the innocent servants. The girl explained to her brother that she was already accustomed to the maid. Henrietta thanked the lady. The blonde explained that she herself was almost blamed for everything. Still crying, the maid explained that she had accidentally stumbled upon the book. Henrietta claimed that she did not throw Ophelia's hair into the office. The mistress brushed the hair from the maid's tear-stained face. Whimpering, Henrietta explained that she could not hate the lady she served. The skinny girl raised Henrietta's face, causing the maid to flinch. Ophelia said that then the maid who stole the necklace from her was kicked out for a reason. The girl's mother was afraid that her daughter might do something to the maid. Ophelia's hands had already begun to slowly squeeze the frightened Henrietta's throat. Sky-blue eyes pierced the maid right through. Tears flowed from the maid's green eyes in streams, and her heart echoed in her ears. Looking at Mrs. Henrietta's hands, she was horrified that she had not realized this earlier. Ophelia did not leave the maid's mind, not because of a feeling of jealousy towards Mr. Alex. The girl also possessed magic that the maid could not even imagine. With a smile, the blonde left the room, crossing her arms behind her back. Snow covered the green shoots. The fire crackled in the fireplace. Approaching his sister, Alex asked if she was tired of looking at the same landscape all the time. The girl's hand on the foggy glass trembled. Ophelia asked when she would have another chance to see such a blizzard. Turning around, the girl replied that she needed to capture everything in her memory before she left. Ophelia is already 23 years old. Flipping through the pages of the book, the heir looked up. Alex believed that his sister sounded like someone who was planning to suddenly disappear. Alexander was already 19 years old at that moment. The guy closed the book and put it on the table. Ophelia asked to refrain from such words. The brunette asked to think about him because without her he will be completely alone. Coming closer to his sister, the guy gently placed his hand on her shoulder. Alex said that today it is more fragrant than usual. Having greatly embarrassed the girl, he asked what kind of perfume she was wearing. After a moment, Ophelia pulled her brother away from her with her hand. Alex asked his sister if he had allowed himself too much again. The girl asked him a question: what would have happened if someone had seen them. Alexander replied that they had nothing to worry about. In his opinion, people would admire their warm family relationships. It seemed to Ophelia as if only yesterday they were ignoring each other. But over the past 3 years, they have become very close. The blonde noticed a book on the table. After reading its first pages, she was surprised that Alex was still interested in such publications. The girl did not understand why her brother was so attracted to terrible stories where children killed their parents. Skinny said that Alex had very specific tastes, but he chuckled and explained that such books stimulated his thought process. Ophelia's blue eyes froze, peering at her brother. The girl asked if he really wanted to convey something to her through such books. The guy's shirt button jingled and fell to the floor. Alex glanced coldly at the torn-off hardware. He noticed that when he put on his shirt, the button was loose. The guy asked his sister what he should do now. He carefully picked up the button from the floor. After all, today Henrietta was away. Ophelia suggested calling Margot. Catching her brother's perplexed glance, the girl explained that this was their new maid. Sighing, Alexander decided that there was no rush. The guy said that someone would sew it on later. Smiling, Ophelia agreed to sew a button on him. The girl put a box of tools on the table. She was surprised that her brother would not change his shirt. He explained that there was no need for this. since she complimented his physique. Ophelia blushed all over because she was sure that he did not hear her words. Alex asked why his sister was so nervous. Smiling, the brother explained that nothing would happen between them. His abs were visible from under his unbuttoned shirt. The girl's heart began to beat wildly. She was sure that if this happened, there would be trouble. Ophelia asked about managing the house. She recalled that it would be easier for Alex and his wife to manage everything. He sat next to him bare-chested. The heir asked if he was too young for marriage. The brunette explained his point of view, that even his sister treated him like a child. The girl forbade him to drink and go to bed in the morning. While sewing on the button, the girl explained that she was his sister and therefore took care of him. During the conversation, the girl almost stuck a needle in her finger. Leaning over the girl, Alex asked her to be careful. At that moment, there was a strong knock on the door. The butler asked my lord if he was busy. Sighing, Alexander allowed us to enter. The door creaked open. The servant reported that a guest from the capital had arrived to Alexander. The guy with blonde hair smiled. He was surprised that Alex was here. The guest greeted the owner of the house. The blonde asked permission to disturb the heir. Buttoning his shirt, the brunette replied that he had already disturbed him. After asking for forgiveness, the blonde introduced himself as Claude. He asked not to be so wary of his appearance. Claude promised not to harm Alex. He showed Alex his ID with a golden lion. The guest was a government investigator first class. Putting the ID in his pocket, the blonde suggested getting straight to the point, piercing those present with his violet eyes. Claude recalled that on this day 3 years ago, a tragic incident occurred. That event claimed the lives of the Duke and Duchess. The maids began to talk among themselves. That night, the roads were badly washed out due to rain. Unfortunately, the driver was unable to control the vehicle and the carriage rolled down a high hill. Cold explained that the ducal couple died as a result of a deliberate and meticulously thought-out murder. The blonde caught the surprised glances of the orphans. A blizzard howled outside the window. Claude offered to quickly update them on their findings. The guy was scribbling something in his notebook. He recalled that the carriage fell off a cliff. Claude carefully examined the notes in the red notebook, and he said that they found one suspicious detail. Someone loosened the wheels on that tragic day. Lowering her blue eyes, Ophelia expressed the hope that the search for the criminal would not take too long. Smiling, Claude assured that he hoped so too. The guy continued the story, and if the evidence was anything to go by, then the carriage caught fire from friction. The blonde asked her if she had noticed anyone suspicious that day. The girl remembered that before leaving she took a little nap. Entering one of the rooms, she discovered a syringe with unknown contents. She politely said goodbye to her mother and stepfather before leaving. Clutching the hem of her dress tightly, she replied that from what she still remembered, there was no one else suspicious. Closing his notebook, Claude asked who could do this to the crew. Lowering her eyes to the floor, the girl said that her mother had many ill-wishers. Ophelia said that it was impossible to count all the ill-wishers even on one hand. She said that her mother was followed by a whole train of envious people. Claude was surprised by such a subtle description of his mother. Ophelia asked if the guest had any other questions. The investigator replied that this was enough for now. Taking a careful look at the investigator, the girl asked if she had met him before. The guy was clearly surprised by this question. The blonde explained that he wasn't so easily forgotten. Claude believed that he was nothing at all for an investigator. The investigator noticed that such words from the lady cut his heart without a knife. Nodding awkwardly, the thin man noticed that Claude was funny. Bowing his head slightly, the blonde thanked him for the compliment. Ophelia asked if he had everything on this. She stood up and asked permission to take her leave. Claude extended his hand and thanked the lady for her assistance. After shaking hands, the girl promised to help the investigation in any way she could. The investigator admitted that it was not his job to voice personal opinions, but the guy simply couldn't help but notice how beautiful the blonde had a smile. Claude guessed that Ophelia must have heard it all the time. Smiling, the girl explained that she was always pleased to hear compliments, no matter how often they were told to her. When she slammed the door, the girl reassured herself that everything was normal, because this event happened 3 whole years ago. Then the girl found syringes in the dressing room. She burned them all, and she convinced herself that they had nothing to do with the investigation. The girl realized that no one could know about this. She promised herself that she would take her mother's secret with her to the grave. Alex noticed that his sister was in high spirits. The girl was a little frightened by surprise, as if he could read her thoughts. Alex gave Ophelia a stern look. Since the girl knew her brother well, She could tell from his facial expression that he was still angry. The blonde understood perfectly well that the head of the house was clearly unpleasant about such things. Having stopped Alexander, the investigator decided to conduct a one-on-one interrogation. The brunette noted that without the permission of the head of the house, he had no right to conduct an investigation. Smiling, Claude handed over permission and explained that he had already received a warrant from the palace. The detective headed towards the exit. The blonde asked permission to start with Ophelia. After all, the gentleman was not yet ready for this. Looking at Claude, the girl agreed. Alex's face twisted with anger. The guy remembered when his sister asked in high spirits what her brother was talking about. The guy replied that she was beautiful and understood what he meant. The detective noticed that Lady Ophelia was like a breath of fresh air. The skinny girl only now began to notice that, because of the investigator, everyone seemed out of their element. The girl thought that the guest was clearly not welcome. She said she understood the detective's admiration. Unfortunately, Ophelia was taught by bitter experience in life. The girl remembered how she came here with her mother, and everyone was whispering around her. At that time, the woman had already buried 3 of her husbands. Claude asked if it was true that Lady Ophelia was going to leave the Arpad estate after the lord came of age. Sighing, the girl replied that she did not hide it at all. She said that this issue had already been completely resolved. After this phrase, Alexander's hand clenched tightly with anger, inadvertently bending the fork. The investigator asked where the girl was going to go. Ophelia said that she would like to go to the Holy Empire of the Vatican. Smiling, the investigator said that he had always dreamed of climbing the ladder of saints. The girl replied that it was one of the sights of the empire. According to legend, every step you climb allows you to be cleansed of sin. Ophelia asked the investigator where he had sinned so much. Claude joked that with misdemeanors, the investigator's path would be closed to him. The ranger reported that there was another legend. It's as if 2 people walk up those stairs holding hands, then nothing in life will ever separate them. With a wink, Claude asked who the blonde would like to go up the steps with. The girl suggested that Claude would like to keep her company. Confused, the investigator began to justify himself that this was not what he meant. The blonde wanted to hear the answer, since the girl understood it all that way. Ophelia assumed that she would become a burden for such a busy and important person. The guy clarified whether she allowed the idea to rise with him at least halfway. The girl suggested that the investigator extract from her words the meaning that he liked. Listening to these conversations, Alexander's heart began to beat wildly and seemed to plunge into darkness. Laughter was heard during conversations. Ophelia asked permission to depart first. Alex asked his sister to wait when she wanted to leave the kitchen. The girl froze in place and turned around, not understanding what had happened. Ophelia asked what was the matter because her brother's plate was not empty yet. She assumed that Alex was again surprised by her overly high spirits. Ophelia explained that he understood that his brother was not particularly pleased with the investigator's presence here. She asked her brother not to go overboard. The blonde started screaming that they had just received terrible news, and it didn't fit into her head that that supposed accident was deliberately set up. The girl did not intend to please the brunette and be in a good mood for him. The blonde asked if Alexander really thought that he couldn't anger her. She winced when she realized that she had called her brother by his full name. The guy recalled that he didn't like it when the girl called him Alexander. Ophelia was furious that the brunette was now paying attention to such trifles. Lowering his tone, the guy admitted that his sister was right, and that he had told her all this in vain. Well, it seemed to the guy that his sister made a fool out of him. Alexander explained that he had asked Ophelia to stay 1,000 times, and every time the girl seemed to ignore his words. Alex didn't understand how she could talk like that to that unfamiliar man, and Ophelia did not understand what exactly hurt her brother so much. Alexander explained to her that over the course of 3 years, they had argued more than once about this. The girl gave back every time, not knowing what to do otherwise. The blonde didn't understand why Alex was so upset today. Her hand was on the railing, and Ophelia wanted to know what the brunette really wanted from her. The girl recalled that the heir promised to let her go as soon as he became an adult. Alex reminded that you can always give another word. Ophelia shuddered sharply. She screamed that if everything was that simple, she would already... Alexander hugged the girl tightly to himself, trying to calm her down. He explained that they were in no hurry and the girl could say whatever she wanted. Ophelia almost started screaming, but then apologized. She plunged into memories and asked her mother if this was really the last time. Despite the promises, the woman explained that they were not intended for her. When she found the syringes in the wardrobe, she couldn't believe it. Then the mother offered her finger to her lips, asking her daughter to shut up. Ophelia explained that they couldn't stand here for a long time because the investigator could suspect them of something. Alexander was upset that his sister was more worried about this man, whom she saw for the first time, than about him. The guy decided to pull himself together, because normal relatives did not behave like this. Ophelia noticed that these conversations with the brunette were exhausting her to death. She was afraid that Alexander would stop playing with her as brother and sister. The guy took Ophelia's hands. Tears slowly flowed down onto them. The brunette noticed that Ophelia touched him to the quick. The guy realized that after so many years spent together, he meant nothing to her. Ophelia was surprised that Alex decided that he meant nothing to her. The girl asked her brother if she had ever said something like that. The blonde asked not to invent too much. She realized that the situation was similar to what happened 3 years ago. Only since then my brother has become a little taller. The girl realized that nothing had changed in Alex's heart since the day of the funeral. Patting the brunette on the back, she consoled him and asked him to stop crying. Ophelia explained that she didn't like it either. Having calmed down a little, Alex asked what exactly his sister didn't like. The girl had a strange feeling, because a few moments ago she was seething with anger. But as soon as the girl saw the tears trembling on Alex's eyelashes, she could not stop admiring him. Wiping away slowly falling tears, Ophelia said that she didn't like to see him cry. The brunette realized that this was a lie, and he replied that my sister adored it. Ophelia was shocked by this statement. The brother explained that she was only kind to him at such moments. The girl instantly pinched him. The guy apologized and took back his words. There was some sadness in the blonde's eyes. As always, their conflict gradually faded away. All of Ophelia's anger seemed to evaporate after one tear from Alex. Extending her hand, the girl offered to go upstairs and go to their rooms. The girl explained that they had no need for petty quarrels. The entire current situation was much more important. She joked that she didn't want to hear herself accused of making the Duke of Arpad cry. When the girl took the guy's hand, he stopped crying. Entering her room, Ophelia ordered her brother to go to his room and go to bed. Brunette, I wish her good dreams. Closing the door behind her with a creak, the girl listened carefully to the steps in the corridor that were moving away. When Ophelia realized that her brother had slammed the door behind him, she left her room. Her hair shone silver in the moonlight. The girl quietly walked down the stairs. At some point, it seemed to her that a mouse had slipped into the castle. There was a figure in black in the shadows under the stairs. The girl looked sternly at her overnight guest and reminded her that she had sent her on vacation. Henrietta suddenly shuddered but quickly recovered and greeted Milady. The visibly nervous maid said that the weather was not favorable and she had nowhere else to go. Ophelia asked the maid if she considered this place her home. The girl allowed Henrietta to go and rest and get to work tomorrow. The servant chuckled because this was the last time Ophelia looked down on her. All her free time, the maid studied every book on magic that fell into her hands. Henrietta practiced magic in secret from everyone. The maid was sure that even Lady Ophelia would be overwhelmed by her level of power. She was sure that Lord Alex would have no choice but to give her a second chance. The blonde put her hand on the maid's shoulder and asked what she was thinking about so intently. The lady offered to tell her everything. Stuttering, Henrietta refused the offer. Unexpectedly, Ophelia noticed magic in the maid's hands. The girl realized that the regular saw the maid in the library. Now Ophelia realized that the girl was preparing a little revenge for her. The lady suddenly grabbed Henrietta's hand, causing her to freeze. Ophelia coldly reminded that she was going to forgive the maid all her sins. The thin woman's hands were clenched more and more, causing the maid to scream in pain. Milady asked if her rival really wanted to repay her. A strong trembling ran through Henrietta's body, and tears began to fall from her eyes. When Ophelia let go of the maid's hand, she fell to her knees in front of her, coughing convulsively. Henrietta did not understand how this could be possible. Milady absorbed the maid's magic without much difficulty. Ophelia didn't know whether the maid was ignorant or stupid. The lady was surprised that the servants did not understand that their magical abilities would never be equal. Approaching the trembling maid, the mistress promised that after she left, this place would belong to her. Ophelia asked the maid not to waste her energy. Tears flowed from green eyes in streams. Ophelia asked if the blonde understood her, lifting her face by the chin with her finger. After Ophelia crushed her magic, the girl could not move for some time. In a trembling voice, the maid agreed with my lady. The investigator wished Lady Ophelia good morning. The girl was amazed to see Detective Claude again. The blonde asked to address him simply by his first name. The girl asked the visitor what brought him so early in the morning. The rays of the warm sun made their way through the windows of the castle. Birds were chirping outside the window. Claude explained that he needed to ask the girl something. The guy realized that it was really too early. Then he promised to return in due time. Ophelia grabbed his sleeve and explained that everything was fine. The girl asked what the blonde wanted to ask her about. She was well aware that last night had been eventful. Ophelia began to worry that the investigator had seen her with Alex or Henrietta. She was very worried that Claude might notice her using magic. The blonde explained that he wanted to know something about the Duke. She asked again, clarifying whether she was definitely talking about Alex. The girl noticed that she was becoming more and more curious. Claude bit his lips nervously. The guy said that on the first day of his arrival, he mentioned that he was authorized by the Emperor's palace. The blonde explained that he had every right to freely inspect any premises of the estate. As soon as Claude came to the Duke's chambers to conduct an investigation, despite the master's dissatisfaction, he allowed the investigator to enter. However, the investigator found an old diary in the drawers there. But as soon as the investigator took it in his hands, the brunette immediately snatched it away. A few moments later, Alex threw the investigator out into the corridor. The guy at that moment looked as if he wanted to kill the blondes at that very second. Claude understood that the diary was a very personal thing, but the investigator was confused by the Duke's overly violent reaction. Ophelia noticed a pattern in that her brother asked her to keep secrets and sent the investigator away. The girl understood perfectly well that Alex had something that he desperately wanted to hide, but she did not understand what her brother so wanted to hide from everyone. She explained that Alex is extremely sensitive to his personal belongings. The girl tried to change the topic of conversation. She asked Claude if he was going to go somewhere today. The investigator replied that the weather was great today, and he would like to take a walk around the village. Ophelia asked the detective if he wanted to look around her room. Claude did not want to detain my lady any longer today. The girl waved through the glass to her new friend. As soon as the carriage drove off, the girl decided to go somewhere. Ophelia remembered that her brother talked about how he loved to read. He often followed her to the library, but she didn't see a single book in Alexander's room. She couldn't even imagine what was hidden in his diary. The girl again asked herself the question of what her brother was hiding. Soon after the click, the door opened. Ophelia ordered the maid to clean the room and change the bed linen. She knew that no one would enter this room until Alex returned. The girl understood that it was a wonderful moment, because Claude had already left, and Alex was at training. The skinny girl understood perfectly well that Henrietta would not stick her nose out for another day. The girl unceremoniously entered her brother's room and opened that drawer with the diary. With a smile, she looked at the diary with a beautiful raven feather on the cover. Leafing through her brother's personal diary, the girl noticed that there was nothing on the first page. Turning another page, Ophelia saw an entry for January 11th, 295. The girl realized that this is today's date. The further the girl read the text, the more her heart beat. Having read the page almost to the end, the girl covered her mouth with her hand so as not to scream. The diary fell from her hands. The entire page was covered with the question, "Why are you peeking?" The girl was shocked that this page warned not to scroll further. Ophelia assumed that it was an accident if Claude decided to take the diary. But the girl realized that this could be a precaution against herself. Turning the page, the girl convinced herself that she was making up unnecessary things. She was relieved when she saw that the rest of the pages were like a regular diary. On the next page was the date when Ophelia arrived with her mother in Arpad. The guy described this event that he had a stepmother. The brunette described his stepmother as being as beautiful as an angel, and he understood his father perfectly. Alex's father fell in love with Ophelia's mother at first sight. The guy described with trepidation that there was a girl behind the charming stepmother. The guy's heart fluttered madly when he came up to greet Ophelia. The guy asked a question in his diary why his heart could not calm down. Unfortunately, that's why the brunette couldn't greet the beauty as expected. The heir claimed that he was ill, but the doctors claimed that he was completely healthy. Our heroine decided to read a little more, because the entries began from that very day. The next day, it seemed to the younger brother that Ophelia was not comfortable in his company. For her convenience, he sat as far away from her as possible. The brunette wanted to wish her good morning but could not squeeze out a word. The girl understood that it was an ordinary diary, and there was nothing surprising in it. The blonde still couldn't understand why her brother attacked Claude. She didn't understand why Alex had written the blood-chilling warning page. The girl continued to flip through the pages. On the next page, the guy described that for the first time the whole family gathered at the table. After that dinner, the brunette's heart beat like crazy. Alex couldn't sleep, trying to calm him down. The heir wrote that G woke him up in the middle of the night. She took up her old ways again. The girl invited the gentleman to spend the night in her company. Despite the fact that summer had long passed, the servants were in front of him only in one thin nightgown. Henrietta persistently asked to stay with her. Ophelia was not at all surprised because Henrietta had always been a petty sneak. Quickly looking through the rest of the entries, the girl realized that they were monotonous. The girl concluded that it was necessary to return the diary to its place. Ophelia slammed the diary shut. For a moment she thought she saw something strange. The blonde started leafing through the diary again. It said that the day before their parents died, Alex decided to drive around the property. It had been a long time since he last took a carriage. The entire trip it seemed to the future heir that something was wrong. The guy was not at all mistaken. The wheels of the carriage turned out to be loose. When he looked at the loose wheels, a brilliant idea was born in his head. When the girl read these lines, she realized that Alex could be the culprit of the accident. A moment later, there was a strong knock on the door. The girl could not believe that her brother returned so quickly. Carelessly putting the diary into the drawer, the girl quickly slammed it shut. She concluded that she needed to leave immediately. Ophelia looked around the room with a convulsive glance and realized that there was even nowhere to hide. The door creaked open and Alex entered the room. With every step of her brother, the girl's heart beat wildly. The skinny woman covered her mouth with her hands, hoping that her convulsive breathing would not reveal her presence. Ophelia didn't understand why her brother came home from training so early. Alex's shirt slid off his broad shoulders and onto the floor. My sister couldn't take her eyes off it. But the girl immediately covered her mouth with her hands. It seemed to her that she was about to get caught. Alexander put a piece of paper in his pocket. He was half a meter away from Ophelia. Tension hung in the air. Sweat began to flow down the girl's face. Having taken off his clothes, the guy sat down on the sofa with relief. The girl had a flash of hope that Alex was getting ready to take a shower, and Ophelia in this scenario would be able to slip out and go unnoticed. The brother again took out a sheet of paper and reread it with sadness. My sister was very worried about why Alex was so worried. The blonde assumed that something happened during training. The girl heard him say her name. She shuddered, realizing that he had noticed her. Ophelia noticed that he called her by her name and not her sister. Something fell to the floor with a clanking sound, and the girl froze in place. She didn't understand why Alexander said her name with such pain on his face. The brunette opened the door to the bathroom and slammed it shut a few moments later. Ophelia realized that this was her chance to get out of here. The girl lifted the hem of her dress and ran towards the exit. But her gaze fell on the note that Alex was reading with sadness. It was her own portrait, which made the girl's heart beat fast. The girl was sitting in her room on the bed. Nervously biting her nails, she wondered what she should do. Ophelia thought about sneaking into her brother's room again. She realized that there was still a lot she didn't have time to read. Skinny wondered what Alex meant by amazing idea. The girl thought that Claude was still away. This meant that she only had to watch out for Alexander. Ophelia did not want everything that happened yesterday to happen again. She heard a knock on the door. The brunette asked his sister if she was here. The girl realized that they would seem more suspicious if it turned out that she was not here. The door creaked and Alexander appeared in the room. Our heroine tried to breathe evenly and pretend as if nothing had happened. The sister asked Alex what brought him here at such an early time. The brunette noticed that lately Ophelia has been waking up like an early bird. Exhaling a sigh of relief, the girl replied that she was getting up no earlier than she usually did. She asked her brother where he was going. The guy told his sister that he was going to supervise the snow removal. The skinny girl realized that this was her chance. For the next few hours, access to Alex's room will be free. Ophelia suggested we go down together. The brother was surprised by this proposal. The sister smiled and said that she wanted to see him off. Jumping onto the bay horse, Alex waved goodbye to his sister. The girl thought for a long time about how to enter her brother's room again. The skinny girl was happy that the opportunity came up so soon. Ophelia tried the handle and was surprised that the door was closed. She previously did not know that her brother locked the door to his room with a key when he left the estate. The assumption closed in her head that he had found out that she had been in his room. Tugging at the door handle, Ophelia realized that she couldn't just melt the lock. Suddenly, Alex appeared behind me and explained that the door couldn't be opened that way. The brother asked the thin woman if she had never used the key. Ophelia's pupils shrank in fear. The girl did not understand when her brother managed to return. Piercing the thin woman with his cold gaze, Alex asked if she was going to melt the castle like last time. Ophelia didn't understand how the guy managed to follow him and go unnoticed. A small trembling permeated the girl's entire body. She realized that the guy knew about her past break into his room. Ophelia froze in a stupor. The brother put a golden key in her hand. The door clicked open. Alexander asked his sister if she would really stand on the threshold. Ophelia didn't know what to do. She couldn't go inside as if nothing had happened. The girl asked permission to enter. The skinny girl was horrified why her brother was inviting her into the room. The blonde assumed that her brother found out that she had read his diary. Clutching her dress tightly, the girl thought about how to get out. Alex noticed that her sister was not very careful this time. The brother explained that he found her hair in the room. Alex sat down on the table and explained that he found it right here. The brunette asked his sister what she was up to. Alexander walked around the trembling girl. The heir asked what aroused such great curiosity in his sister. Because of her curiosity, the girl did not even hesitate to enter his chambers. The brunette held out his diary and asked the girl to take it. At the girl's perplexed look, Alex explained that he knew that his sister wanted to honor him. Ophelia refused despite her great curiosity. She didn't want her brother to overstep himself to please her. Alex noticed that this was a completely expected phrase. The brunette explained that now he has nothing to hide. The guy explained that he knew everything from the very beginning, when the investigator entered his chambers. He knew perfectly well that Claude would come running to her and tell her how he was kicked out of the room. Ophelia asked if her brother really knew that she was going to break into his room. The sister asked if this was the reason he left the dire warning. Alex hoped that the skinny girl wouldn't read anything. Lowering her eyes, Ophelia reassured her brother that he had not read to the end. The brunette regarded this with disbelief. The blonde began to slowly back away and insisted that she had no need to lie. Alex assumed that the girl had enough time for this. The guy asked if she heard everything. Ophelia was surprised that her brother was only concerned about this. The brunette, very embarrassed, asked under the table if she had hidden then. The guy remembered that he then said his sister's name. The girl explained that she heard her brother whispering her name. Alex covered his face with his hands, feeling intense shame. Laughing nervously, the young man asked Ophelia to erase this from her memory. The girl doubted that she would succeed. The blonde looked at her brother. This was not the turn of events she expected at all, and she convinced herself that she had no reason to reject the young man's proposals. The guy wrote down that a one-on-one dinner with O was real torture for him. Alex was very tense then. His voice was not heard at all. The young man wrote down that he should avoid eating in the company of a girl. The skinny girl remembered this evening very well. That day, her mother went on her honeymoon. Ophelia guessed that the next entry would be on the day the accident happened. Initially, this day did not foretell any troubles, but then the heir was informed of a terrible incident. Alex couldn't believe it was all for real. The guy wanted this to be a bad dream. He described how a courtier shared that the Duke's crew had skidded on ice. Then Alex's stepmother died on the spot. But they didn't have time to take my father to the hospital. They both passed away that day. An investigation was launched on the same day. But an investigation showed that the wheels were to blame. But some details didn't add up. The wheels were recently replaced with new ones. A trembling pierces Ophelia's body. The girl, with a trembling voice, asked her brother if it was true. Very nervous, Alex answered positively. Ophelia asked why her brother ordered the wheels to be replaced. She asked her brother what brilliant idea he was writing about. Alex didn't understand at all what his sister was asking. The blonde began leafing through the diary. The girl showed her brother his notes for December 13th, 295. The girl quoted a phrase from the diary. Alex asked if he really needed to answer. Ophelia asked if he wanted her to suspect him. The guy covered his face with his hands, practically breaking down into tears. He admitted that he used the tire change as an excuse, and he wanted the girl to ride with him around his domain. Ophelia cast her stern glance at the brunette. She asked not to joke with her like that anymore. Very nervous, Alex insisted that he was telling the truth. The guy recalled that he invited his sister to go with him. Ophelia actually remembered that her brother had told her something similar then. Then the guy noticed that his sister loved to sit within four walls all the time. That day, the girl refused the offer, explaining that she was that kind of person. The guy suggested taking a walk in the fresh air, but she didn't feel like going outside in such cold weather. He reminded his sister how she answered him. Ophelia asked how she should have guessed what he meant. Alex explained that back then he couldn't really put two words together. Putting his hand on the girl's hand, he asked if he was now conveying his thoughts better. Breaking into a scream, Ophelia explained that this is not the case now. The girl admitted that after reading these lines she began to strongly doubt him. The blonde remembered how many thoughts and questions she had had since their parents died. Then Alexander literally stuck to her and treated her with warmth. The girl puzzled for a long time about what her brother wanted from her. Ophelia did not understand how it was possible to guess so poorly about her own feelings. Only after reading the diary was she finally able to understand everything. The guy, without noticing it, fell in love with her at first sight. After this guess, the blonde decided to read the rest. Turning over the next page, the girl froze in surprise. Alexander described the night when she tried to escape. The guy explained in his diary that he couldn't let her go. The brunette was sure that Ophelia definitely knew something about the accident. When Alex was putting things in order in his father's office, he found a syringe in one of the shelves. The blonde felt a strong tremor. The girl was sure that she had burned every single syringe. Putting his hand on the girl's shoulder, the brother asked her not to stop. Alex warned his sister that she might not like further recordings. With his eyes downcast, the heir explained that he wanted the girl to read everything to the end. In the next entry, the guy described that he increasingly noticed that he was staring at Ophelia as if he were a girl. The uncle drove the guy crazy with his empty chatter. He initially guessed that Ophelia set him up. The sister explained to the brunette that she no longer wanted to read. He explained that it was too late to retreat. Swallowing nervously, the girl offered to read. The guy admitted that he loved his sister like a man loves a woman. Alex can't find any other reasons why his heart is beating like crazy. The brunette independently found the true cause of the accident. On that tragic day, the axle between the wheels was melted. The next day, the guy wrote in his notes that he suspected Henrietta. A day later, the maid came to him and begged him to drive Ophelia away. Alex assumed that the maid had gone completely crazy. He decided that Henrietta did not belong next to him. The heir thought that Henrietta might be right. He still couldn't believe that Ophelia was a magician. The guy admitted that Henrietta could have lied. It seemed to him that his sister was to blame for the death of his parents. The guy decided to keep such thoughts to himself. He didn't care even if Ophelia was a murderer. If this were so, then it would appear that the heir fell in love with the woman who killed his father. Alex was very nervous that his beloved did not give up the idea of leaving here. The guy couldn't let his sister do this, and he didn't care whether the girl was involved in this tragedy. The guy in the notes begged Ophelia to stay by his side. The blonde looked at the drooping Alex. She realized that there were 2 weeks left until he came of age. The brunette wanted to come up with any way to keep his beloved. The girl pressed the diary to her brother's chest with all her might. For several moments she froze in this position. Ophelia's hands were shaking violently. The girl realized that he also suspected her. The blonde couldn't believe that Alex was sure that she had killed his mother and his father. It turned out that her brother had been suspecting her for 3 years. Ophelia asked how he could love her as a woman. The girl turned around and wanted to leave. In parting, he asked the question how he could love a woman who could kill his father. The diary flew with all its might into the guy's muscular body. Almost breaking into hysterics, Ophelia insisted that she didn't do it, and she assured that she was not involved in this murder. Alex, confused, asked his sister not to scream. The girl grabbed him by the clothes and convinced him that she was not to blame. Tears streamed down Ophelia's face. She didn't understand how her brother could suspect her for so many years. The guy took his beloved's hand. He gently strokes her face. Alex begged to listen to him. The brunette did not want to make the girl cry. The heir explained that he could no longer hide the diary. After all, an investigator was now roaming around the castle. Ophelia was furious that her brother still suspected her. This diary explained why my brother read terrible books in which children killed their parents. The blonde realized that her brother was deliberately waving such books in front of her nose. The girl was surprised by the cruelty of her brother. The heir constantly hinted to her that he knew the truth, and the guy wanted his sister to understand this too. Ophelia pushed her brother away and asked him not to touch her. and it became clear to her why her brother was keeping her here. She was sure that her brother wanted to admire her execution. The brunette tried to deny everything. Ophelia remembered him roaming around. Most likely the guy was trying to find evidence of his sister's involvement. Alex didn't understand what evidence she was telling him about. The girl shouted to stop discussing this topic. Ophelia told how she kept her mother's secret all these years. Her mother was like a fragile butterfly, because as soon as you approached them, she would fly away. And so that the woman would not fly away from her daughter, the girl sacrificed everything for the sake of the cunning mother of her careless habits. The girl did so much for her and gave so much. The girl burst into tears and explained that now everything had gone to waste. Ophelia quickly walked towards the exit, explaining that she had had enough. Alex grabbed the girl's hand, trying to stop her. He begged you to listen to him. When the girl read his diary, she should understand everything. The girl snapped back that she had already heard enough. Breaking into a scream, the guy asked if his sister really thought that he wanted her executed. The guy grabbed his sister by the shoulders. Ophelia asked to be released. The girl didn't care what he wanted, but Alexander could not allow his beloved to leave like this. The girl asked to let her go while she gave the guy the right to choose. The blonde decided to use her magic. A blue aura covered his hands. She was ready to use magic and warned about it. Ophelia explained that everything depended on what her brother would do. Recoiling, the heir asked whether the girl intended to kill him. The girl smiled and explained that it wouldn't come to that. Ophelia explained that it would just be a light slap on the wrist. Closing his eyes, the guy said that he was ready for this. The sister was amazed at the guy's answer. Alex was ready for this if his sister wanted it. Placing the girl's hand on his cheek, he explained that even if she wanted to take his life, he was ready. The guy wanted to open his heart and accept everything that was connected with Ophelia. The girl screamed furiously for Alex to let her go. The guy pressed himself against her hand and explained that he was serious. The girl's face was greatly distorted with rage. Magic formed in her hands with a bluish haze. The girl abruptly pulled her hand away. Smiling, the brunette explained that he was sure that the girl would not harm him. With a smile, the brother asked Ophelia if she had stolen the account book. Alex explained that he didn't know what his sister was planning, but decided to play along. Then the guy was also eager to see his uncle out. Ophelia felt ashamed that he understood, but still closed his eyes to it. She was sure that no one knew about this. Even though Alex didn't catch her red-handed, he understood everything intuitively. The skinny girl asked what her brother thought about the syringe found in the office. The brother was clearly surprised by this question and asked what she meant. The girl's gaze dropped sharply. She asked the guy not to pretend to be an idiot. The girl reminded him of the entry that said that he found a syringe in the office. Alex suggested that his father might need him for health reasons. Ophelia asked if he seriously thought so. Looking at the floor with his gray eyes, the brunette asked if there was any point in asking him. The heir was sure that his sister would not tell him anything anyway. Ophelia was shocked that he was willing to pretend he didn't understand anything. It was crazy. After all, a healthy young duke would hardly need injections. The blonde asked her brother what he knew. The heir asked if anything would change if he told. The girl covered her face with trembling hands. She claimed that the truth did not kill her mother. Placing a massive hand on Ophelia's shoulder, his brother asked her not to torment herself for this. Leaning towards the blonde, Alex insisted that this was no longer important to him. He didn't care whether the girl was guilty or not. The skinny girl squeezed her brother in her arms. Ophelia tried to say something hesitantly, turning to her brother. The guy gently began to twirl her silky curls. He asked the girl not to rush. A trembling once again ran through the girl's body. She knew very well that she needed to say something. The blonde asked to give her 3 seconds. Alex explained that in 3 seconds he would kiss the girl. The brunette explained that if the girl is against this, then let her hit him in the face. Despite these bold words, Ophelia felt that he was trembling just at the thought of refusal. She clenched her hands tightly and tried to tell him something. But Alex instantly shut the girl up with a kiss. The girl abruptly threw her brother aside and asked him to wait. The heir kissed her tenderly on the cheek, and then the girl realized that he had never seen her as a sister. During a passionate kiss, their hearts beat in unison. The rays of the setting sun illuminated the walls of the castle, letting sunbeams walk along the walls. The skinny woman opened the door with a click and walked up to Henrietta. The maid nervously tried to start a conversation. The maid noticed an unusual shine on her mistress's lips. A shiver ran through Henrietta's body, as if she was remembering the previous night. With feigned politeness, the maid asked where my lady was. Smiling, Ophelia explained that she was at Alexander's. Henrietta's heart was bursting out of her chest with jealousy. The maid was shocked that Ophelia spent the entire night with Lord Alexander. Henrietta showed magical abilities since childhood. The girl could easily defeat an ordinary knight, but there was no talk of anything outstanding. But the abilities she was terribly proud of turned out to be weak. Ophelia's powers were tens of times more powerful. The maid first noticed the girl's powers the night after the funeral. Henrietta was very worried about how lonely Alex was that evening. The maid was sure that the guy was terribly sad. She waited anxiously for the lord in his room. The maid waited for the master until late in the evening. The girl was worried that Alexander had not returned for a long time. When the maid decided to look out the window, she froze. Henrietta saw Lord Alex and Lady Ophelia together through the window. The maid understood perfectly well that the girl intended to leave. The maid did not understand why Mr. Alex was with her and why he tried to stop her. When Henrietta was cleaning Mr. Adrian's room, she found an account book. When the maid saw this book, a brilliant idea came to her. For her, this was a great opportunity to set up her rival. The maid often cleaned Mrs. Ophelia's room. She threw a girl's hair into Mr. Alex's office. This was not a big deal for the maid. Henrietta was sure that she could easily get rid of her rival. After talking about the maid who stole a necklace from a girl when she was a child, Henrietta realized that Ophelia's magic was on a completely different scale. For almost 3 years, the maid groveled before her mistress. The girl studied magic every night, gritting her teeth. The maid was incredibly happy when she felt that her magic was growing. The maid was sure that this magic should be enough to overpower Ophelia. As Henrietta hid under the stairs, she saw Alexander sobbing on Ophelia's shoulders. Then the girl did not understand how this was possible. She did not recognize Mr. Alex. The maid fell in love with Alex's nobility and arrogance. She was fascinated by the cold gaze and elegant animal-like movements of the gentleman. But to her regret, the girl could only admire his beauty all these years. She was shocked that the guy was crying while clinging to another girl. Henrietta worked hard to get here. The girl did all this just to be close to him. But since Ophelia was brought to the castle, the guy no longer looked in her direction. Alex didn't even try to listen to her. And the maid was very hurt that the guy stood and sobbed in Ophelia's arms. The blonde shuddered sharply as if sensing something was wrong. Alex noticed his sister's wariness and asked what was wrong. Ophelia replied that it was just trifles. That night, Henrietta planned to attack Ophelia while she was sleeping. The girl could not do anything while Mr. Alex was next to her. The maid nervously bit her fingers. She hated to even think about what these two were doing alone. The maid understood that the master did not let Ophelia out of his arms all night, and whispered to her about his feelings. Henrietta was sure that unimaginably terrible things happened behind closed doors. The maid wanted to prevent this at all costs. After meeting with her rival, Henrietta was sure that she underestimated her. The maid was sure that this would work to her advantage. The maid was confident of her victory because for 3 years she secretly improved her magic. But when Ophelia defeated her, the girl gave up. And no matter how much Henrietta trained, she remained just a seedy mouse. She understood that she would inevitably be crushed by the predator, because this was the inevitable fate of the rat. Ophelia stood over the motionless traitor. Henrietta realized that these 3 years were just a waste of time. Unfortunately, the grains of the maid's magic were crushed by the incredible strength of the mistress. The girl did not sleep for several nights after the incident, gripped by incredible fear. The head maid forced her to return to work, because everyone was already waiting for her. The woman began to blackmail her that if the girl did not get up now, she would have to report this to the master. Henrietta assumed that this would happen one day. Mr. Alex was more in love with Mrs. Ophelia, just as a girl once fell in love with him. So he fell in love with my lady at first sight. This was too obvious from the start. Despite the fact that Alex tried to the last to ignore the strange tension between him and his sister. All his attempts were in vain. The guy could no longer hide his feelings. When Lord Alex and Mrs. Ophelia passed each other in the corridor, the guy himself stopped without realizing it. He followed her with his gaze until Ophelia disappeared around the corner. The 3 maids often whispered to each other that there was something between these two. Henrietta argued that this could not have happened, because the couple were brother and sister. Then the maid with purple hair said that Ophelia was never officially included in the Arpad register. Henrietta believed until the very end that this would not happen. But every day the servants' whispering became louder. Henrietta didn't want to believe it until the very end. Since the guy still doubted Ophelia, the maid was sure that she had a chance. Alex often called the girl to find out about his sister's location. Henrietta was extremely glad to be in Alex's favor. The maid did not know that everything would turn out this way, but she melted the old seams on the wheels. The death of the Duke greatly shook the maid. Henrietta hoped that Alex would need her and she could get through this. After such sacrifices on Henrietta's part, the blonde was with the master until the morning. Fury boiled within the maid. She couldn't believe that they had become close so quickly. The maid could not believe that Ophelia would now remain at the Arpad estate forever. Tears streamed down Henrietta's face as she blamed the impostor for her suffering. The maid was sure that the girl was trying to take Mr. Alex away from her. The maid so wanted Milady to disappear from her life forever. Unexpectedly, in the corridor, the girl met a gentleman. The maid noticed that his shirt had never been so unbuttoned before. Continuing to walk along the corridor, Henrietta noticed that today was a wonderful day. The girl tried to talk to Mr. Alex. The brunette walked on, as if not noticing her. Realizing this, beads of sweat began to drip down from her face. The girl tried to call out to the gentleman. The maid went after the master and asked if everything was all right with him. Henrietta asked how she could help him. The guy ignored her again. The girl begged him to answer. She promised to do whatever he wanted. The door slammed shut, leaving the maid alone with her thoughts. The girl clenched her trembling hands. She realized how much the gentleman had changed dramatically. Henrietta no longer felt needed by him. It seemed like the girl was destined to be rejected, as if she meant nothing to him. Henrietta opened the door and burst into the master's room. She once again begged to listen to her. Alex coldly replied that the maid was not allowed to come here, but she convinced the gentleman that there was a slight misunderstanding. The girl claimed that it was she who straightened the welds. Henrietta frantically tried to prove that she did it, and not Mrs. Ophelia. She asked to be punished. The girl did not want to be abandoned and was ready to pay for it at any cost. The blonde asked to blame her for the death of their parents. Henrietta was much better off being hated and despised than simply being forgotten. The sobbing maid asked to be locked in the deepest and darkest dungeon they could find. Henrietta wanted the gentleman to see her sinful death with his own eyes. The girl was on her knees. She was sure that it couldn't end like this. She simply didn't believe it. The clock chimed from time to time. Her hands were shaking. She tried to at least hold on to her lover. Alex turned to the maid. The girl frantically waited for his answer. Henrietta's body was completely shaking. Alex pierced her with a cold gaze. The young master asked whether Henrietta so craved his attention that she decided to do something like this. The maid frantically tried to prove that she was not lying to him. Alex rang the bell. Henrietta begged her to believe that she had melted the stitches. Alex ordered the girl to be removed from his sight immediately. 2 guys entered the room and took the order. While the guys pulled the maid out, she begged to believe her confession. Henrietta insisted that she was telling the truth. The girl was sure that her rightful place was next to the master. The gentleman followed the killer with his cold gaze. The girl was still screaming that she just wanted to be close to him. The maid begged him not to give up on her. The girl sat droopingly in her room. The woman asked what she was doing here. The gray-haired maid noticed that everyone else knew their job. The woman noticed that the investigator's office needed cleaning and ordered Henrietta to get to work on this task. The girl sat on her bed and wondered why Mr. Alex did not believe her. She guessed that the guy assumed that she was lying to win his attention. The blonde clutched the hem of her dress tightly. The head maid started screaming and ordered Henrietta to quickly get to work. The thought occurred to the maid that the guy was giving her another chance. That Mr. Alex didn't want to believe that she could be a killer. Henrietta got out of bed. The woman asked why the maid allowed herself to behave this way. The gray-haired woman asked the blonde where she was going to go. Henrietta calmly replied that she was going to the investigator's office. The maid noticed that the woman directed her there. She ordered the blonde to go there, but to finish by evening. Due to the snowfall, they were severely short of labor. The woman warned that if she saw that Henrietta was slacking, she might forget about dinner. The girl knocked hesitantly on the door. Now she didn't want to work at all, but she also needed to clean up here. Henrietta entered and asked for forgiveness for the disturbance. The girl saw papers lying on the floor, and the table was also littered with them. The girl noticed that the investigator looked like a neat person, but in fact it was the other way around. Henrietta lit a candle and walked on, wondering what a mess it was here. She was amazed at how many documents there were. Unexpectedly, the blonde drew attention to the sheets that lay under the table leg. The girl decided to put the documents in a visible place so that the investigator would not yell at the servants later. After reading that document, Henrietta could not believe her eyes. The maid ran to another part of the castle. The girl did not believe that she finally had such an opportunity. The maid was surprised to find this document. Henrietta's heart was beating wildly. She was sure that Alexander would no longer turn away from her. Henrietta was sure that once Alex saw this, he would give her a second chance. She clutched the paper in her hand. The girl was suddenly hit on the head with a stone. Bloody stains scattered everywhere. Someone was furiously banging on the gentleman's door. Ophelia was surprised what the noise was earlier in the morning. Alex, lying on her lap, noticed that he had not called anyone. The butler said that it was very urgent and asked the young master to open the door. The brunette came out and asked what happened. The silver-haired butler reported that there was an emergency. The man said that the servants who were clearing the snow discovered. Trembling all over, the butler hesitated a little because he didn't know how to say this. Having gathered his courage, the butler announced that they had found Henrietta's body. Ophelia was no less shocked than Alex. The brunette asked again, not believing his ears. He asked if Henrietta was dead. The gentleman asked if the investigator had returned yet. The butler explained that they had just sent for him. The guy said that he would get ready and come to the place. Ophelia asked if Henrietta really died. Alex explained that he was going down there because he needed to confirm the fact of death. Ophelia was horrified by the fact that just yesterday the maid was alive. Alex asked his sister to calm down and threw a warm raincoat over her shoulders. The skinny girl asked who could have killed the maid. Lowering his eyes, he said that nothing was known yet. The brunette explained that Henrietta was not perfect, but still did not deserve such a fate. Throwing his coat on, Alex noticed that many people disliked Henrietta. Lord promised that the investigator would figure everything out. Ophelia squeezed her brother's hand tightly and said that she wanted to go with him. The brother recommended the girl to stay here. The guy was sure that his sister was not ready to see the corpse. The skinny girl explained what to do. The girl did not want to wait for the brunette alone. Drops of cold sweat began to slowly flow down the guy's face. Alex agreed to take his sister with him, provided that she dressed warmly. Two guys stood near the body and talked to each other. Alex asked to go to the body. The brunette looked at the corpse covered with a white sheet. At the sight of this horror, Ophelia's heart pounded furiously, echoing in his ears. The gentleman calmly asked where the investigator was now. The butler reported that Claude was already on his way. Alexander realized that they were investigating a murder together, and now they had another corpse. Claude arrived at the scene and asked everyone to make way. The investigator could not allow the tracks and evidence to be trampled underfoot. Alex asked the detective if he had contacted his colleagues. He explained that now everyone was up to their ears in work, promising that their colleagues would arrive later. The investigator asked the gentleman not to worry. He assured that his colleagues would arrive soon. The blonde suggested gathering inside. The guy asked who could help him move the body. The butlers whispered among themselves. Nobody showed any desire to help. Claude immediately realized that there were no volunteers. Alexander pointed his finger at the two guys and ordered them to help the investigator. Turning to the others, the master asked them to return to the estate and remain calm. The brunette explained to his sister that she should go with them. Claude asked to wait for the gentleman. Alex froze, trying to understand what was going on. The investigator reported that he found something in Henrietta's hands. The investigator noticed this detail and carefully unclenched the maid's stiff hands. Claude concluded that it was a piece of paper. The guy couldn't understand what exactly was written on it. Presumably the killer took the paper, but the investigator did not know whether the paper was of any value. The detective suggested moving the body first. The blonde asked who discovered the body. One of those who had to carry the body said that he found a corpse. Claude asked the servant to describe how it happened. Every detail was important in the investigation. The butler explained that he was clearing snow outside. There was a smile on the detective's face. Ophelia was sure that she had already seen something like this somewhere. A strange feeling washed over the girl. Alex asked his sister if everything was okay with her. The brother suggested going inside so that his beloved would not catch a cold. The brunette put his hand on the girl's fragile shoulder. Turning around, it seemed to the girl that something was wrong with the investigator. Therefore, he interrogated the guy. Claude asked what he saw last night. The red-haired guy answered the investigator. Ophelia tried to remember what she and her brother did. On the night of the incident, she and Alex were reading books in his room. Almost all the time they chatted and admired the sunset, and then they gradually fell asleep in each other's arms. Ophelia slept soundly all night, and when I woke up at dawn, I met Alex's loving gaze. Skinny realized that Henrietta was killed late at night. At that time, the girl was in the sweet embrace of sleep. She began to suspect her brother, because he did not sleep early in the morning. The girl didn't know if the brunette was sleeping at all. The investigator began his speech with a preface that everyone was shocked by Henrietta's death. Claude thanked those gathered for agreeing to participate in the investigation. The guy said that he wanted to start the interrogation with the Duke. The blonde asked Alex what he was doing at 1 in the morning. Without hesitation, he explained that he was sleeping. The detective was sure that Alexander was alone at that time. He looked at his sister as if asking permission to tell. Looking at the detective, the guy answered in the negative. Alex explained that he was with his sister at the time. Whispers passed through the crowd of courtiers. The servants discussed whether the rumors were true since they were together so late at night. Claude asked Ophelia if her brother was telling the truth. Lowering her eyes, the girl confirmed that everything was so. The detective decided to skip Lady Ophelia's questioning and go straight to the butler. The man said that he gave instructions to the servants who were responsible for cleaning the guest rooms. Claude asked if the man remembered their names. The man reported that Brandon, Chris, Daniel, and Henry were doing the cleaning. The detective asked what time it was then. The man said that his watch had been broken for a long time and he could not tell the exact time. Claude was calmly writing something down in his notebook. The butler insisted that he would never have harmed Henrietta. The man was noticeably nervous and drops of sweat were running down his face. The blonde continued the interrogation by asking the housekeeper. The woman said that she finished work early and was resting in her room. The detective noticed that the woman lived alone and there was no one to confirm her words. Claude asked the economy whether he and Henrietta were getting along. The woman tried to justify herself by saying that being in her room at 1 in the morning is completely normal. The housekeeper said that everyone did not like Henrietta because she was lazy. The detective asked whether the other servants shared the woman's opinion. The services began to explain that this could not be the reason for the murder. The services also replied that no one would dare to touch her, since the girl knew how to cast magic. Listening to conversations about Henrietta, Ophelia began to understand that the girl also had a difficult life. The investigator thanked for the testimony. The blonde said that the housekeeper and butler had dubious alibis. The investigator responded that the suspects were on bad terms with Henrietta. The woman, breaking into a scream, asked if he really suspected her. She tried to make excuses. Claude said that he was not the only one who suspected her. Since the guy was an investigator, he was obliged to suspect everyone without exception. The detective asked permission to occupy the living room for a short while. The blonde explained that he would like to interview some people in more detail. Alex agreed to give the investigator permission to conduct a personal interview in the living room. The lord asked if he would be needed. Laughing nervously, Claude replied that of course the gentleman was needed. Everyone gathered in one room. The guy put his hand on Ophelia's waist. The girl explained to her brother that he was now too close to her. The Duke asked if she didn't like it. The girl replied coldly that now was not the time for that. The brunette apologized and gently kissed his sister on the cheek. One of the courtiers carefully watched the couple. The blonde shuddered when he met the gentleman's gaze. The butler turned away sharply and pretended that nothing had happened. Alex asked his sister if she was really worried about what people would think. Visibly nervous, Ophelia asked why he got this idea. The brother explained that he was just asking. The brunette raised Ophelia's face, trying to look into her sky-blue eyes. Alex agreed that it was good that the girl cared about the opinions of others. The Duke asked why the thin woman avoided his gaze. The brunette gently touched the girl's silky hair. The sister explained that she was a little tired. Alexander invited his sister to return to the room and rest. A little embarrassed, Ophelia explained that it was still very early. The guy suggested reading in his office. The girl noticed that the pace of speech and manner of communication had not changed at all. She realized that Henrietta's death meant nothing to him. Ophelia had a feeling that Alex knew this would happen. The girl was lying on her brother's lap. At this time, he gently stroked her silky hair. Ophelia asked not to distract her reading time. The guy jokingly said that she was breaking his heart. Straightening her silver curls, the girl stood up from her brother's lap. The skinny girl explained that Alex had too hard thighs, and it was uncomfortable for her to lie down. The brunette pressed himself tightly to his sister's hand. The guy asked if it was really a sin for Ophelia to be healthy. The girl noticed that usually it was easy for her to remain calm, but in the presence of Alex, it was very difficult for her. She decided to take a bath and go to sleep. Since Henrietta was no longer alive, Ophelia would have to wash herself. The death of a loved one was very difficult to accept. When the blonde's mother died, the girl waited for a long time, as if the woman was about to knock on the door. At that moment, she wanted to believe that her mother would come in with a bunch of gifts and a smile on her face. The blonde became very sad, realizing that the dead would never return. Now you can catch his eye. Talk to him, touch him. Ophelia wanted to do this not only within the confines of her own imagination. The girl regretted that she did not understand this earlier. Alex suddenly distracted his sister from her thoughts, causing her to flinch. The brother asked what she was thinking about. The girl admitted that she realized that she would have to take a bath alone. Her brother offered her his company. Ophelia gave her brother a light slap in the face. The skinny girl explained that she already sees a dirty thought in Alex's head. The guy explained that he was not against it, and noticed that his sister had a very soft hand. The brother offered to escort the blonde to the room. The girl explained to Alex that today it would be better for him to sleep separately. Ophelia explained that Henrietta died today and would be suspicious of acting like that. The blonde noticed that the maid was madly in love with Alex. The guy explained that he didn't want to think about this liar. Alexander jumped up sharply and explained to his sister that regrets cannot change the past. The brother noted that there is no point in these, "Oh, if only I were kinder." Ophelia explained that she understood this perfectly well. Alexander did not understand how his sister could push him away. The guy said that his sister was doing the same as always. As soon as they got close, Ophelia began to build walls outlining boundaries. She asked her brother why he was going to start a fight. Alex replied that he didn't need it. The guy asked his sister if she really thought that he was going to argue with her. The girl shuddered because there was some kind of threat in the brunette's eyes. Alex seemed to be trying to pierce right through the girl with his ash-gray eyes. A small trembling ran through Ophelia's body. The girl felt somehow uneasy, although she knew very well that her brother would not harm her. The girl remembered a recent incident. Ophelia felt somehow uneasy because she decided that she was something for Alex, but he suggested ending this conversation. The blonde tried to explain her feelings. Her brother assured her that he perfectly understood her desire to be alone. Alex asked to say it directly next time. The guy asked the girl not to make excuses for Henrietta's death. After these words, Ophelia wanted to stop her brother, but he did not pay attention to the girl, and soon the door slammed behind him. The blonde sighed when he was left in splendid isolation. He wondered what a fool her brother was. Ophelia couldn't sleep without her boyfriend. There was a ringing silence in her room. She spent only 2 nights with Alex, but now Ophelia already missed him. It was uncomfortable for the skinny girl to lie alone in this huge bed. The girl felt so lonely. Soon she fell into the world of dreams. Someone's footsteps broke the silence of the night. A man in black robes approached the peacefully sleeping Ophelia. Someone grabbed the girl tightly. Ophelia began to choke and her vision began to blur. She realized with panic that someone was trying to kill her. The girl did not want to die like this, at the hands of an unknown killer. Gathering her last strength, Ophelia used her magic. The unknown killer howled in pain and removed his hands from the girl's neck. She realized that if she had waited any longer, she would have died. The girl began to feel very sick. The room blurred before her eyes. Ophelia fell limply onto the bed, losing almost all her strength. Before her eyes there was darkness after releasing a huge amount of magic. The girl shrank all over, not realizing that it was a very familiar male voice. Ophelia's consciousness slowly plunged into darkness. Her last thought before losing consciousness was the question, who attacked her? Her exhausted body fell onto the bed. It was a beautiful sunny morning. Birds were chirping outside the window. The girl suddenly opened her eyes. It was hard for her to breathe. Ophelia wondered if she had dreamed it. Skinny was ready to swear that last night someone tried to strangle her. Touching her neck, she realized that this was not a dream after all. She rushed to the mirror. Seeing her reflection, she concluded that it definitely wasn't a dream. Ophelia couldn't believe she was taken by surprise. The girl clutched the frame and tried to remember who it was. She was furious that someone would dare do such a thing. The blonde remembered that she had melted half of the killer's face and he was significantly mangled. Ophelia caught herself thinking that she should not have died. Her heart began to beat wildly, and scarlet drops of blood began to flow from the girl's mouth. Blood flowed down her face. Scarlet drops of liquid fell onto her snow-white dress. The girl suggested that this could be the consequences of releasing a large amount of magic last night. Ophelia was different from other magicians who only relied on learned spells. The girl's witchcraft did not require pronouncing spells out loud. All she had to do was concentrate, and she could use any spell she wanted. Since fear then paralyzed Ophelia's mind, she put into practice the first thing that came to her mind. Spitting out the remaining blood from her mouth, the girl thought that she would not allow this to happen again. Such effective spells could kill her. Smiling, the girl promised that she would find the mysterious killer. She didn't care at what cost she would have to do it. Ophelia was ready to dismantle the entire house brick by brick to catch her attacker. The maids were cleaning the living room, polishing everything until it shined. The butler told Lady Ophelia that when she finished with the hall, she would need to go up to the second floor. Ophelia calmly walked down the stairs. The man asked the lady what happened to her. The girl asked where her brother was now. The butler said that the guy went to the village early in the morning on a very important matter. Ophelia asked where Claude was now. The man told her to leave the house alone even earlier than the master. Ophelia remembered that her attacker had a deep voice like Alex and Claude. The girl suspected that Alexander could well attack her. She doubted and was not sure that Claude was capable of such a thing. The brother was convinced that she was involved in the death of his father. Ophelia remembered that their conversation yesterday ended on a bad note. The lady sharply asked the man if he had noticed anything unusual. He asked again in surprise. Looking at the butler, the blonde warned him not to force her to ask twice. He flinched when he heard the mistress's tone, and he said that all he knew was that Mr. Alex and the investigator left the house this morning. Ophelia raised her tone and explained that she could not call him butler. He asked the lady not to be so rude. She asked since when she became his mistress, and she warned the butler to think with his head before doing anything, and promised to keep an eye on him. The maid was quietly discussing what kind of fly had bitten the mistress. The thin girl decided that since they were trying to kill her, she should stop pretending to be a good girl. The blonde decided to take the initiative into her own hands. Ophelia walked around and asked the workers if anyone had seen a man with a wound on his face. Everyone asked her questions in surprise. The guys Alex trained with explained that knights get injured during training. But the brunette explained that lately, no one even walks around with bruises on their faces. Ophelia began to doubt if there was any sense in these questions. None of the servants had any reason to want her dead. The blonde opened the office door and noticed that there was no one here. The blonde maid greeted her mistress. The girl explained that she was going to clean up the office. The maid asked if she should come back later. Ophelia allowed the girl to stay. The lady asked if she had seen someone with a wound on their face, but she again heard a negative answer. Milady inquired about the servants being on vacation. She explained that the investigator had ordered that all vacations be postponed. At the moment, all the servants were in full force. Gritting her teeth, Ophelia realized that she would never find the alleged killer. After Milady's personal interrogation was completed, she felt like a complete fool. The girl already had 2 main suspects, but now she stood here and spent all her time interrogating the servants. Ophelia wanted to avoid meeting the cruel reality. She touched the wounds on her neck. The girl realized that if she thought carefully, then in the yard there was the place of Henrietta's death. She headed into the yard, the snow crunching under her shoes. The girl stood at the site of Henrietta's death. The thin woman turned to the deceased maid. They wanted to kill Ophelia in the same way as the maid, without prying eyes. The girl was hurt that they tried to kill her at the hands of Alexander. Sitting down, she began to cry and wanted to stop searching. She already wanted to return to her room and give up. Ophelia noticed that there was much more snow where Henrietta's body was found than around it. The girl took a piece of snow and it floated up into her palm. Her heart began to beat wildly, echoing in her ears. Ophelia realized that someone had done this on purpose. She found a man in this pile of snow. The girl felt as if her heart was about to jump out of her chest. The blonde wondered how long he had been waiting here to jump out and attack her on the sly. The hands again reached for the girl's neck and grabbed her in a death grip. Ophelia couldn't believe it. Claude, with a disfigured face, tried to finish off the girl. The detective grinned. The blonde realized that she had already seen this grin. Previously, the girl also felt this, but did not understand why Claude seemed terribly familiar to her. Laughing, the detective replied that he thought Ophelia would not appear. The guy asked how the skinny girl was treated with the gift he left. Blue began to cover the girl's face. She felt severe pain. The blonde squeezed her throat too tightly. The detective explained that he was trying to intimidate the girl. When he entered the room, Ophelia was sleeping too peacefully. The blonde threw away the two-faced guy with all her strength. Claude said that it was he who killed the stupid maid and attempted to kill Ophelia. While the villain was making his speech, Ophelia realized that she needed to get closer. The blonde's eyes grew dim again. Splashes of blood flew out of her mouth. Covering her mouth with her hand, the girl knew that this was a side effect of magic. Claude said that he initially did not want to kill Henrietta, but due to her carelessness, the maid found out Claude's real identity. The guy had to get rid of her because she could become a big nuisance. The investigator explained that the girl could have survived if she had not gotten in the way under his feet. Scarlet drops of Ophelia's blood splashed across the snow. The blonde realized that the investigator had gone completely mad. The girl was shocked that he killed Henrietta for such stupidity. The girl laughed nervously. Claude's massive hands squeezed the girl's face. The detective asked if she thought it was funny. He asked if Ophelia had not yet understood anything. She grabbed it sharply, hoping to hurt her opponent again. Grinning, the detective asked what it was just now. Ophelia froze in horror, not understanding why her magic did not work. Maliciously, the blonde asked if she was really going to use another spell. The detective grabbed her hand sharply and said that he would not allow this to happen again. The villain explained that he was unprepared last night. The detective said that he took something with him today. Opening his jacket, Claude revealed an anti-magic necklace. The blonde understood that unlike the others, Ophelia knew perfectly well what it was. The necklace can block every spell Ophelia wants to use against him. With heavy breathing, the girl noticed that Claude was prepared today. The skinny girl asked what she had done to annoy him. The guy asked if she knew Sir Cameron. Ophelia shuddered when she heard this name. She couldn't believe it. Smirking his disfigured face, Claude said that the answer was written on her face. The detective said Cameron was once Ophelia's father. The blonde explained that the man was also his father. The girl asked again in a trembling voice. Claude claimed that he was the man's son. Ophelia realized that the detective could be telling the truth because they were about the same age. What was confusing was that the guy was too young to be a first-class investigator. She should have thought about this sooner. Ophelia was too carried away by Alexander and did not notice this under her nose. Claude abruptly grabbed the girl by the shoulder and asked what he should do with her. The detective noticed that through the efforts of her mother, his father suffered an unenviable death. The girl remembered that the guy's father was one of her mother's victims. Claude warned the blonde that he would not let her go so easily. Ophelia noticed that she and her mother had never heard of a man having a son. He insisted that he had no right to call the man his father. After all, the guy for Cameron was just an illegitimate child. As soon as Claude was born, he was immediately taken to a shelter. His mother did not have the financial means to raise a child. The only person who visited Claude was his father. The man brought the boy clothes and sometimes gave him some money. The blonde in those moments felt the happiest in the world. Only occasionally could the blonde see his father. Then Cameron suddenly stopped visiting his illegitimate son. Claude grabbed the girl by the hair and called her a creature. The guy explained that this happened after his father married Ophelia's mother. He started yelling that he was abandoned because of Ophelia and her mother. Initially, the blonde thought it was inevitable. No one expected the guy to be born. Claude explained that the more he thought about it, the weirder it all became. The fake detective did not understand why he was doomed to such a life. The freak's hot tears slowly flowed onto the snow. Sobbing, Claude asked why there had to be so much pain and suffering in his life. This injustice has angered the guy since childhood. He believed that he had every right to kill Ophelia. While the blonde was telling his biography, a brilliant idea came to Ophelia. Only now did she realize that she just needed to rip off the necklace. The girl explained that she did not share the opinion of her stepbrother. The disfigured face was twisted with anger, and the blonde's body was covered with small tremors. Ophelia understood that now it was important to wait for the right moment. Covering his face with his hands, Claude explained that he had never asked the girl for anything. The girl understood that now she had a chance to escape before the freak went on a rampage. The girl wanted to run away, but Claude abruptly grabbed her hand. The blonde accused Ophelia of growing up without a father, and now he had completely lost his human appearance. The guy claimed that he would not let the blonde live happily for the rest of her days. Ophelia realized with horror that the freak was about to break her arm. In complete despair, the girl grabbed her opponent's hand. Scarlet drops of the guy's blood stood out in the snow. The blonde asked how she dared to disfigure him and bite him. He explained that at night he just wanted to strangle the girl. The guy grabbed Ophelia by the neck again and promised to strangle her this time. The freak explained that he wouldn't even look at the fact that the girl had magic, because now she was absolutely powerless. Hope appeared in the girl's eyes. She saw the freak Alex behind her, who came to her aid. The brunette asked Ophelia not to twitch. Alex furiously hit the offender, defending his sister. The girl was still sitting in a daze, trying to come to her senses. The bloody knife stuck into Claude's back. The brother apologized to Ophelia for almost being late. Alex took out the bloody weapon from the immobilized body. The brunette explained that the girl has the right not to forgive him. The girl felt ashamed that she had confused this soft, insinuating voice with Claude's voice. The freak grabbed Alex's leg and promised to kill the two of them. The brunette struck again and asked his sister to turn away. Claude, laughing hysterically, asked the girl not to look at him like that. The brother carefully sheathed the sword. Ophelia broke the thread from the pendant that protected the freak from magic. Smiling, the blonde asked which of them was now dead. When Ophelia was no longer a child, but had not yet become an adult, her mother married Sir Cameron. The newly made stepfather, being a knight, constantly went on campaigns. For this reason, Cameron always left ownership to her mother. The woman absolutely loved doing this. The girl knew very well that her mother never needed a companion when traveling. Every time her mother got on a horse, her only thought was to get her back. The woman always promised to leave for a while and come back soon. Ophelia was sure that as long as she was obedient, her mother would not leave her. The girl hoped that while she was waiting for her, the woman would definitely return. But one day, Ophelia was left completely alone in the estate. While the little girl was riding on a swing in the garden, anxiety was eating her up from the inside. That day, she saw suspicious movement in the bushes. That day, she met Claude. Then she didn't know who it was because she had never seen him here before. The boy asked why she was crying. Then Ophelia explained that she was not crying at all. The blonde noticed that the baby had red eyes and a frown. Clutching the hem of her dress, she explained that she was quite happy and had no reason to cry. Claude assured that he was sincerely jealous of her happiness. The boy threw a peach into her hands. Ophelia was amazed at how delicious the fruit smelled. The girl asked if the guy had come to make fun of her. Just one sweet peach removed the girl from her wariness and anxiety. Then the blonde became good friends with the guy. She loved to play hide and seek with Claude. The guy knew how to disappear into the garden without a trace like anyone else. The boy always hid in the most unexpected places. For Ophelia, the game usually ended when the girl gave up after a long search. But one day, while playing, my mother came into the castle. The woman asked what kind of boy was next to her daughter. Claude greeted awkwardly. The woman pierced her daughter's new friend with a cold gaze. When the guy left, the woman didn't understand who this beggar thought he was. Sparkling with her beauty, the woman explained to her daughter that she had saved her. Mom explained to Ophelia that she shouldn't hang out with people like him. The girl thought that the boy was not a beggar at all. She was shaking, and she was sure that the guy was just a neighbor boy who just wanted to play with her. Pressing herself against the hem of her mother's dress, the girl thanked her. The woman apologized to her daughter for devoting very little time to her. In those days, for Ophelia, her mother was surprisingly much more important than friendship with that boy. Because of this, the girl swallowed everything she wanted to say and soon completely forgot about the guy. The anti-magic pendant swung in Ophelia's hands. The girl noticed that she was right when she suspected something was wrong. Because of this, Claude seemed so familiar to her when they first met. The girl realized that this was the guy she played with as a child. Then the girl did not attach much importance to this, that there was a very large inconsistency. Sir Cameron's estate was located on the top of a hill, and they simply could not have neighbors. Only now did Ophelia have a full-fledged picture in her head. Now it became clear to her why the guy was hiding behind a different name. The girl stands over Claude's bloody body. She asked if he really didn't want her to declassify him. The guy laughed madly and noticed that the girl was quite quick-witted. Ophelia chuckled and explained that she was sorry to disappoint the freak. The skinny girl had no idea who he was until the blonde himself revealed his true nature. Only after the blonde had revealed all his cards did the girl realize that the guy really looked like that guy. Claude was an exact copy of his father when he was bedridden by his terrible illness. The blonde cursed her and his mother even with his last breath. Both men had a disgusting grimace on their faces before they died. Ophelia asked the blonde what he really wanted. The girl understood that the guy was starting a game of hide-and-seek as an excuse to get at least a glimpse of his father. Claude ran throughout the castle with bated breath, with anticipation and hope. The blonde was looking forward to bumping into his father, who would recognize him and hug him tightly. The freak's hand grabbed the hem of Ophelia's dress. The girl was horrified at what it had come to. Blood clots were flying out of his stepbrother's mouth. Ophelia became disgusted by this. Alex hugged his sister tightly and asked if everything was okay with her. He pushed the savior away from him. The girl asked him to wait one more minute. The girl wanted to negotiate with the mortally wounded offender. Sighing, he gave his sister 1 minute to talk to the killer. She asked the blonde to congratulate her, because she won hide-and-seek against him for the first and last time. Magic energy quickly accumulated in Ophelia's hands. She asked her brother not to approach her, but to stay away. The girl decided to end this once and for all. Ophelia wanted to know how it was for her mother to take the lives of her many husbands. The girl did this for the first time so she could not stop her trembling. Alexander grabbed his sister's hand, distracting her from the spell. Ophelia aggressively asked her brother what he was doing. The brunette begged his sister to stop. The blonde noticed that the lord had gone crazy because she almost cut off his hand. Alexander explained that he had to do this. The guy explained that if his sister uses magic now, then everything will be in vain. Ophelia asked what he was talking about. Alex hugged his sister tightly. He told the blonde that no one knew that he had magic. No one except Ophelia, of course, as soon as Claude takes his last breath. The girl shuddered and wanted to stop Alex. She screamed that he should not dare to do this. But a magical aura was already shining in the guy's hands. He asked his sister for forgiveness, and he decided for himself that he had to protect his sister from this darkness. Soon blood spattered across the path. Ophelia looked at Claude's body. The girl grabbed her brother by the shoulder and asked who gave him the right to interfere. The girl believed that it was she who had to take the life of the freak. The girl shuddered when she saw drops of blood flowing from the sword and her brother's smile. The brunette explained that he doesn't just smile. Alex was filled with happiness at that moment. Ophelia asked her brother how this could be understood. Ignoring the question, Alex replied that he had very seductive lips. The thin woman pushed the brunette away, explaining to him that now was not the right time or place for this. Ophelia screamed at her brother, not understanding why he killed Claude. The blonde still had a lot of questions. Wiping blood from his cheek, Alex explained that he was filled with jealousy. From the very moment Claude arrived at the castle, the lord did not like him. The investigator unceremoniously flirted with Ophelia. He unceremoniously wandered around the house without permission. Claude's attacks on Ophelia are forever stuck in Alex's head. The lord was infuriated by the impudent grin and all sorts of words from his opponent. Turning away from her lover, Alex explained that Claude knew much more about her than the brunette. Smiling, Alex explained that he could no longer restrain himself. Ophelia was very surprised that her brother killed the fake investigator just because of this. Dropping the bloody sword, he asked if his sister wanted to tell him something. The guy gently pulled back the collar with which the girl covered the signs of strangulation. Alex reassured his sister that the killer was no longer breathing. The girl wanted to say something to her brother, but heard the sound of hooves behind her. The two men apologized for being late. Ophelia tried to figure out who all these people were, that they have finally arrived. The skinny girl asked who these people were. Alex chuckled, explaining that the guys were real investigators. The dark-haired guy apologized for being late. Bowing, the brunette greeted the young master of the Arpad house. The guy introduced himself as Claude, a first-class investigator. Ophelia was a little shocked at the way the investigator introduced himself. Nodding at the motionless body, Alex explained that this was the one he was talking about. The investigator explained that he had slowly formed a picture of what was happening. Claude suggested taking the body from here first. Ophelia noticed that the investigator's name was Claude. She asked who this man was. He explained that the swindler's name was Cain, and he covered himself with the name of the investigator. The detective took out some paper and invited the girl to see for herself. Taking a closer look, Ophelia realized that it was a wanted poster. The skinny girl thought that this paper seemed very familiar to her. The girl suggested that Henrietta was clutching this leaflet in her hand at the time of her death. Ophelia saw Henrietta's body covered with a white cloth appear before her eyes. Then a piece of such an advertisement lay in the hand of the deceased. The girl felt incredibly sorry for the maid, knowing why she lost her life. The maid was an innocent little lamb. Alex asked the detective if the man knew that Kane killed the maid. Investigators explained that they were very sorry to hear this. Claude offered to tell us a little about the criminal. From his story, it became clear that Kane was a working-class man who grew up in an orphanage. Since childhood, the blonde was fond of pickpocketing. In the south of the country, Kane robbed almost every second person. The offender repeatedly escaped from a juvenile detention center. The blonde did not attract much attention from the authorities, since the thefts were petty and the offenses were light. Claude said that over time, the severity of Kane's crimes grew rapidly. Just recently, a criminal set fire to his own shelter and fled the scene of the crime. Kyle had a long history of mental instability, and the court commuted the death sentence to life imprisonment in the most brutal prison. Then they put him in a cage. But the guy never reached his destination. Along the way, Kyle attacked Claude's colleagues and then escaped. The detective assumed that it was after this that the blonde ended up here. Soon after the criminal escaped, the investigator noticed that his identification, wallet, and anti-magic necklace were missing from his pocket. For the detective, the scars served as a reminder of that terrible day. Startled, Alex asked what the rest of the investigators had been doing all this time. With remorse, the investigator explained that his colleagues were drinking in a nearby pub in the company of beautiful girls. Ophelia was amazed at how inappropriate the first-class investigators were. Claude offered his sincere apologies. Alex snapped that such things should not be hidden from the Imperial Majesty. The detective agreed to everything except this. Alex wondered if Claude didn't realize the gravity of his actions. This morning, the Lord received a letter from an investigator named Claude. Opening the letter, Alex was horrified. The guy learned about the execution of one of the criminals along with a wanted notice. The guy experienced a huge range of emotions when he realized that this was the same man who was walking around his estate calling himself an investigator. The brunette asked the investigator if he could imagine his desperation as he searched throughout the house for the culprit. Unfortunately, Alex was unable to find him then. Only now Ophelia understood why her brother had not been home all day. Alex wanted to find him alone. The guy gathered all the estate workers and asked them to comb the area. But the servants failed to find him. At that moment, anxiety grew strongly in the guy's chest. When Henrietta's body was found, Claude took on the role of investigator. The blonde suspected everyone, causing everyone to doubt each other. But the blonde did not provide any evidence of his personal innocence. When Alex realized everything, he rushed home. The guy realized that if he had been late even a minute, something irreparable could have happened. The brunette didn't even want to think about what could have happened. Claude once again asked for forgiveness. The investigator was greatly tormented by a feeling of guilt. He finally realized what the Lord was trying to achieve. With tears in her eyes, Ophelia explained to her brother that everything was fine. The most important thing for the girl was that he saved her life. The girl understood what picture Alex wanted to paint for the detective. The blonde decided to help her brother make the final touches. Claude was willing to accept whatever punishment the couple deemed fair. Thoughtful, Alex explained that Kane had mentioned that his parents did not die because of an accident. Then the brunette realized that this incident occurred due to someone's malicious actions. Alex told the detective that he saw with his own eyes the conclusion about this marked with the seal of the Emperor. The guy asked what really happened that day. Claude explained that this was the first time he had heard about this. The investigator was surprised that this document bore the Emperor's seal. He remembered that on that day there were several decrees from His Majesty. Alex asked him to remember what was said there. The detective explained that at that time he was very shaken by what happened. Nothing came to Claude's mind at all. The blonde couldn't remember it specifically saying that. The investigator suggested that Kane could have stolen documents from his suitcase. Claude assumed that the documents had nothing to do with their parents. The detective explained that the official ruling was that the couple died due to an accident. At that time he was a second-class investigator. And then this case was not in Claude's competence. The detective couldn't say for sure, but he had never heard anything about a murder. The detective said that there was one interesting detail. On the burned parts of the crew, they found traces of a chemical reaction that was provoked by magic. Alex asked in surprise, not believing what he was hearing. Ophelia replied that they had not been informed about this. Claude assumed that this was kept quiet because the case was officially ruled an accident. The investigator said that magicians often use high-quality carriages for travel. Detectives did not even think that the couple's parents could have been killed in this way. Alexander asked the detective in surprise whether he was sure of this information. The brunette was surprised that the investigator agreed to the investigation. Claude nervously explained that he was not in charge of the case. The man justified his colleagues that they made every effort to investigate the case. Ophelia asked her brother not to put pressure on people with rage in their eyes. Averting her eyes, the blonde assumed that the investigators had done everything in their power. The girl believed that the investigators had come to the most reliable conclusion. Ophelia suggested not to drive the investigators into a corner and led her brother by the hand. She didn't understand what the smile on her brother's face meant. The brunette explained that Kane was a criminal, but sometimes he spoke the truth. Alex glanced with his ash-gray eyes and asked if their parents had died in an accident. The Lord explained that the incident that happened to them was most likely a murder. Alex explained that he could name the culprit. Ophelia turned to her brother. Surprise was visible in her eyes. Claude asked who was behind this. Brunet explained that the investigator most likely knew the man. Alex said that a maid named Henrietta served in his premises. The investigator stammered and asked if this was the same girl who had recently been killed. The blonde asked her brother if he was sure of his conclusions. He replied that he was 100% sure of this, and he explained that she confessed, that she melted the joints in the carriage wheels. The brunette said that Henrietta came to him with a sincere confession. The investigator asked why the gentleman did not report this to his colleagues. Sighing, Alex explained that he initially did not believe the maid. Seeing his sister's shocked face, his brother realized that she understood what he was talking about. An entry from the diary popped into Ophelia's head. There, Alex wrote that Henrietta was back to her old ways. The maid was ready to try to attract the attention of the young master by any means. The guy's eyes drooped and he said that he had not given any meaning to her words until that moment. Everything came together in Alex's eyes when he mentioned the traces of magic found on the carriage. The investigator asked if she was not the one who was deprived of her life, and he explained that the maid would never be able to atone for her sins. The detective promised to conduct a reinvestigation as soon as he returned to the capital. The Lord shook his head and explained that there was no need for this. The brunette saw no point in reopening the case after so many years. He explained that he did not want the Arpad scandal to spread throughout the empire. The guy noticed that the killer was already lying in the ground. He understood that the investigation would certainly find the deceased guilty. The investigator wanted to say something. Alex glared at Claude and explained that there was no need to create so much trouble. He suggested that he turn a blind eye to the fact that the investigators had let the criminals slip out from under their noses. And the investigator agreed not to talk about the carriage, not about Kane. Alex thanked Claude for his cooperation, and the snow began to dance around them. Alex suggested that the girl go into the house so she wouldn't catch a cold. She smiled and thanked her brother. The rays of the setting sun played on the guy's face. The brunette asked her not to worry about anything. Looking at the lifeless body of the freak, Ophelia realized that everything was really over. The door to the estate slammed loudly. Taking his sister's hand, Alex noticed that her hands were ice cold. Then the brother was very worried that Ophelia might get sick. The girl noticed the remains of blood on her brother's face. The blonde asked him to wipe his face. She noticed that the brunette, stained with blood, looked very ominous. Smiling, the guy wiped the remaining blood from his face. He suggested that he should go wash himself. According to the brunette, a warm bath will wash away all traces of the crime. Ophelia glanced sideways at him, feeling something strange. The girl was surprised that they had recently been hanging on the brink of death. The blonde still hasn't fully come to her senses. She didn't understand how her brother could now conduct an absolutely calm dialogue. Then Alex put his hand on the blonde's waist. After that, everything that happened seemed like just a bad dream to the girl. Ophelia showed that absolutely nothing happened between them. Footsteps echoed rhythmically down the corridor. Alex asked the blonde what she would do. She explained that she was a little tired because today had been a very difficult day for her. The girl wanted to spend the rest of the day lying on the sofa with a glass of whiskey. Suddenly, the brunette froze. Ophelia asked her brother what happened to him. Smiling, the brunette asked about the sofa in whose room she was talking about. The rays of the setting sun made their way through the windows. The skinny woman's heart began to beat with renewed vigor. Ophelia explained that she was talking about the sofa that was in her bedroom. Sighing, the brunette noted that he was very sorry to hear this. The blonde noticed that it was hard to tell from her brother's face. Alex gently ran his hand over his wounded neck. The eyes shone with slits in the rays of the setting sun. The guy explained that they would have to occupy their thoughts with something else. He reminded his sister that they had one more unfinished business. The brunette finally intended to kiss the girl. Ophelia pushed him away, explaining that she had not washed her face and looked like a beaten dog. The guy explained to her that it didn't matter to him at all and squeezed the girl in his tight embrace. The brunette explained to her that everything was fine, and that Ophelia looked as stunning as always. He kissed the girl tenderly. When it was already evening, the guy poured the blonde a glass of whiskey. Ophelia accepted the drink gratefully. Alex noticed that the blonde was thinking about something and asked what was going on in her head. The girl hesitantly explained that the thought flashed through her mind that 3 whole years had already passed since the day she arrived here. Smiling, Ophelia reminded the brunette that they also drank whiskey that night. The girl clarified that she meant the night when their parents died. The blonde with a glass in her hand explained that then she did not know how to live on. That night, her brother handed her a glass of whiskey. Alex promised that this drink would help her calm down. Ophelia still remembered how she held the glass with trembling hands and did not know how to live further. Then the brunette took responsibility for holding a decent funeral. The girl grinned and said that they were very young then, but she was already ready to rely on him. Having placed it in a glass of strong drink, Alex was amazed at the transience of time. Feeling a little sad, the girl asked permission to ask her brother a question. She wondered why Alex said that if she used magic it would all be in vain. The guy said this today when his sister wanted to finish off Cain. Ophelia asked why she couldn't use her powers. The girl noticed that Alex knew very well that she herself wanted to kill her stepbrother. Rising from his chair, the brunette explained that he knew this very well. The guy explained that because of this, he had to finish the killer himself. Ophelia jumped up and shouted his name. The brunette explained that he hated even the thought of the girl touching the blonde. Alex was very worried at that moment that if the investigators had found out about the girl's abilities, Claude would have blamed her for the deaths of her parents. Under such conditions, the brunette would not be able to shift the blame for the death of his parents onto Henrietta. The blonde asked in surprise what the guy meant. Alex asked his sister to think again. The Lord understood that the investigator had arrived too late. Claude would not have been able to connect these cases together. The brunette wanted to sort everything out himself, without making too much noise. Look down, the brother said that Cain acted completely differently. Unlike the real detective, the blonde said that the whole house's parents were killed. If the girl's power came to light, the workers would find a connection. Ophelia reminded that the guy cannot know this for sure. Sitting on the bed, Alex agreed with her opinion. To this he explained that it was not worth giving even a reason for such thoughts. Ophelia was disappointed that the winds of anxiety and suspicion always blew between them. When Alex becomes the head of his house, he still won't be able to rely on anyone. The girl was disappointed that her brother still did not trust her. The Lord muttered that he had always found it impossible to read a girl like an open book. The brunette suddenly grabbed his sister's hand and pulled her towards him. The guy noticed that today he saw right through Ophelia. The girl fell onto the soft mattress. Surprise was visible in her eyes. Alex asked if this made her happy. The guy expected a completely different reaction from her. Covered with a red blush from embarrassment, the girl asked what she should be happy about. Ophelia explained that they would not be able to so easily close their eyes to everything and run from the truth for the rest of their lives. The guy explained to her that he just wanted her to know how much he loved her. Alex explained that it was not easy for him to accept that he had fallen in love with a girl who was only trying to kill his father. Smiling, the guy explained that he could not do otherwise. The brunette promised Ophelia to love her for the rest of her life. The guy just couldn't stop loving the blonde. Alex pressed the girl's hands to the bed. The completely calm girl asked her brother not to deceive himself. The girl forcefully pushed the brunette away from her. The skinny girl asked why he decided that she was the killer. Ophelia asked why the brunette asked to keep his mouth shut and do nothing when they could get rid of all this. Alex wanted to stop the girl, but she didn't want to hear him at all. Skinny asked if he really thought that she killed her own mother. The girl loved her mother more than anyone in the world. Alex did not let up and suggested that Ophelia saw this only because she sincerely loved her. Jumping out of bed, she asked what he knew about love. Alexander desperately tried to convince him that he knew what he was talking about. The guy pierced Ophelia with his smoky, cold eyes. The brunette noticed that even tender feelings for his mother made him jealous. Brushing the blonde hair out of Ophelia's face, Alex convinced her that jealousy was worse. Stroking the girl's face, the brunette reassured her that this had already happened in the past. The guy knew very well that he was the only one left with the girl. Ophelia shuddered, noticing that her brother could not think straight. Alex recalled that he had already told her that it was Henrietta who melted the welds on the carriage. Alex took his sister by the shoulders and said that the girl herself admitted everything. He knew that the accident was not only due to the stitches. From what Claude told the guy, the Lord knew that traces of a magical reaction were found at the scene of the tragedy. Someone put a magic circle on the wheels, which caused a reaction. Ophelia reminded her brother that Henrietta could easily have done this. Alex understood perfectly well that the maid was not that good at magic. The Lord explained that the maid could barely melt the seams on the wheels. The brunette explained that it was impossible for the maid to conjure a magic circle that would cause a chemical reaction. Alexander knew that the carriage had been repaired a whole year before the incident, and he understood that traces of magic disappear after a week. From this, he concluded that not a trace of that repair should have remained. Ophelia was shocked, because Alex wrote in his diary that the wheels were replaced shortly before the accident. Sighing, the brunette explained that this was true, but the catch was that it was not a magician who worked on the wheels of the carriage, but an ordinary mechanic. Ophelia's eyes widened with stress, and her heart began to pound wildly in her chest. Alex recalled that Ophelia and Henrietta were both sorceresses. The brunette recalled that the girls mastered the same craft at different levels. Claude explained that the magic circle that caused the explosion required great skill. Looking sideways at his sister, Alex explained that they didn't have such a high-class magician in the entire duchy. Not one of the wizards could pull off such a trick. Looking at the girl, the guy noticed that she had a completely different level. The brunette reminded his sister how she suppressed Henrietta's magic. The maid didn't even have time to think about the spell. Alex accused the shocked girl that she could freeze the carriage with a snap of her fingers. Smiling, the girl admitted that that day she did not notice Alex at all. Ophelia noticed that the guy knew too much. The girl tucked her hair behind her ear and admitted that she caused the accident with the crew. The blonde explained that she always managed to pass by others without being noticed. The sister asked Alex who he was that he could see right through her so easily. Staring at the wall with her blue eyes, the skinny girl noticed that she had hidden the ledger. The girl understood perfectly well that this was not a secret at all for her brother. The guy admitted that he knew about this incident from the very beginning. Ophelia realized that the guy guessed the truth about everything. The girl knew very well that her brother was very observant. The blonde gripped the hem of her dress tightly, not expecting Alex to be so attentive to detail. The guy explained that at first he doubted his theory. The brunette felt someone's presence and followed his sister. At that moment, Alex had a complete picture and everything fell into place. That night, the brunette realized what he felt and thought about his sister. The guy gently stroked the blonde's face and asked her not to worry. Alex explained that he was the only one who knew this information. Breathing out a sigh of relief, the girl noticed that the guy had been pretending for a long time to believe in her lies. Ophelia asked her brother if he knew that she was hiding under the table then. The guy hesitated a little and answered in the negative. A little embarrassed, Alex asked not to ask him about this. The blonde asked why he had been pretending all this time. The brother explained to the girl that it seemed to him that she herself wanted it. Alex explained that it was all over now and none of this was important anymore. Alex's calm was interrupted by Ophelia's phrase. The girl accused him of lying because if it were true, he would not have said that. The dim moonlight seemed to reflect the peace in Alex's soul. The guy repeated that he was ready to accept Ophelia with all his heart and move on. Sadness crept into the girl's eyes. The skinny girl understood that if it were so simple, her brother would not hiss through his teeth that one should not love his father's murderer. Alex brought up the topic in hopes that Ophelia would deny everything. The brunette recalled that when they received the news of the accident, the sister said something. Thin woman asked if both died. Then she whispered that this should not have happened. At that moment, Alex was dumbfounded why his sister said exactly that. After that, after thinking a little, the brunette came to an answer. The Lord realized that the girl was then surprised that the wheels rolled further. The guy assumed that his sister planned that nothing would be left of the carriage. Breathing out a sigh of relief, Ophelia asked if these conclusions were really made because of a couple of words. Alex answered positively with cold calm. Averting her eyes, the girl asked how someone could take a casually thrown phrase so seriously. The guy explained that he loved the girl anyway. A small tremor ran through her body. The brunette explained that he loved the girl, just as she loved her mother. A question flashed through Ophelia's mind. Is this really how love should be? Does love really make him stick to the woman who killed his father? This feeling pushed me to the desire to forgive all sins. Many questions flew through the blonde's head. Ophelia headed towards the exit, muttering, "I see," under her breath. The girl was sure that her mother's many suitors had their own guesses about how her husbands died. But despite this, the men sincerely sympathized with their loss. The suitors, despite all their suspicion, lost their heads at the woman's smile. Just because of one smile, my mother's husbands were ready to fulfill her every whim. A woman could notice that her beloved husband was tired and give him a health injection. Even when the men felt the strength leaving their bodies, they all thought about the same thing. All the lovers attributed their poor health to their no longer young body. The suitors drove away thoughts that their beloved wife might be involved in something. The lovers refused to believe otherwise until their last breath. Ophelia believed that her brother could know about everything, but the girl sincerely loved her mother. Running her hand over her brother's face, the girl explained that for her, her mother was a person whom she simply could not help but love. The woman gave birth to a blonde, fed her the best food, and dressed her in the most beautiful dresses. Thanks to her mother, the girl grew up in a comfortable home. Ophelia's hands trembled violently. Tears rolled out of her eyes. Thanks to her mother, she lived most of her life as an accomplice to murder. The whimpering thin woman explained that she had no choice, and for her this was the only way out. The girl could no longer watch her mother's sins and decided to make a decision herself. Then Ophelia decided that if mother could not stop, then she would finish everything with her own hands. Taking the girl by the trembling hand, Alex suggested that the girl loved her mother madly. Tears rolled down her cheeks again. Ophelia explained that the guy was right and she still loved her. The girl still has a frozen memory of how the woman left the house. The blonde explained that she regretted what she had done every day. At first, Ophelia tried to collect all the syringes that her mother hid around the house. The girl wanted this to remain only her secret. But when the girl heard about the accident, she realized that this should not have happened. The blonde cast an explosion spell on the wheels. She thought about everything in advance. Ophelia did not leave any traces of magic on the carriage itself. The girl didn't understand what the hell happened there. Only after some time, when the blonde realized that everything had not gone according to plan, she was overcome with regret. Ophelia cried at night. I don't understand why she did this. The girl regretted that she did not follow her mother until her death. The girl, breaking into a scream, explained that she should have gotten rid of the syringes in advance. The blonde wanted to be with her mother in the last minutes of her life. Ophelia remembered how shocked she was that night. After the tragedy, mixed feelings raged in the girl. At some point, the blonde stopped believing in herself. Every time Ophelia covered up the traces of her mother's crimes, she prayed that this would be the last time. Most of all, the girl dreamed of getting out of her shackles. When she heard that the Duke had also died with the woman, the girl was overcome by jealousy and could not resist. The blonde did not understand why the Duke was able to share the last moment with the woman, but she was not. Ophelia remembered how the woman invited her daughter to go with them on their honeymoon. She still blamed herself for letting the Duke die alone with her mother. The skinny girl blamed herself for not going with them. Only Ophelia knew the woman's secrets, and only she understood her. The girl wanted her mother to belong and stay only with her. Alex was surprised that his sister was jealous of her mother for his father. Tears were still filling Ophelia's eyes. The blonde asked her brother if he thought it was strange. Skinny said that the love she felt for her mother ended up being a feeling of obsession and possessiveness that destroyed their parents. Stroking the guy's face, Ophelia confirmed that he fell in love with the woman who deprived the guy of his closest person. The girl added gloomily that she knew that this was the last answer her brother wanted to hear from her. Squeezing the lord's cheeks, the girl asked what he was going to do now. Alex gave the girl a downcast look and explained that he knew all this. Having buried his head in her lap, the guy explained that hearing that it was because of his sister completely discouraged him. The brunette asked if, when there were no emissions left, they would pretend as if nothing had happened. Put it in your head. Alex explained that nothing could save him. With a sharp movement, the guy pulled the girl towards him and hugged her tightly. Ophelia heard her brother's heart beating. The girl explained that she had no intention of putting an end to their relationship. Alex held the fragile body tightly to himself and gently touched her silver curls. The brunette explained that all he had in mind was how much he wanted to kiss the girl's tender lips. This phrase sent a shiver through the girl's body, and she asked what he was saying. Ignoring his sister's indignation, Alex kissed her tenderly. The blonde squeezed her brother's shoulder tightly and asked him to wait. Laughing nervously, Ophelia asked if he had really gone crazy. The girl screamed that she had just admitted that she had killed his father. Alex gently kissed Ophelia's hand and reminded her that he could no longer be saved. The blonde decided to tell everything without hiding a single detail. She was about to tell her brother the truth that he so longed to know. Lowering her eyes, Ophelia said that her mother was like a butterfly. My daughter was afraid that she could fly away at any moment. That's the only reason the girl decided to take her mother's life. She no longer wanted to get lost in the woman's shadow. Also, the girl did not want her mother to abandon her as she abandoned others. Since the woman grew up in a village in a peasant family, she knew everything about herbs from an early age. The woman understood perfectly which of them were poisonous and which were medicinal. Mom knew everything about the flowers that grew by the road. She understood how one could kill with these wonderful flowers. And she was as beautiful as an angel, captivating with her beauty and inspiring confidence. Sky-blue eyes and a beautiful smile made a person believe her stupidest lies. Ophelia explained that no matter how hard it was for her to believe it, her own father died in the same way. Alex was very surprised that no one was suspicious of this. Skinny explained that her father died from someone else's sword during the uprising. No one could have thought that the woman was involved in this. Despite the fact that Ophelia was the closest person to her mother, the girl heard about her father's death only after learning from the news. The blonde found out what her mother did only after meeting Kane's father. To somehow calm down, the girl wrapped herself in her brother's arms. She explained that she learned this after the death of her first stepfather. That man was quite friendly with the baby. Ophelia first began to suspect her mother at Cameron's funeral. It was strange that a healthy man died from blood poisoning. Then for the first time the girl felt something was wrong. She couldn't understand in her childhood head why her mother was haunted by such horrors. That day the little girl brought tea to her mother. Knocking on the room, she realized that there was no one there. There was deathly silence in the room. Ophelia assumed that her mother went for a walk and left her tea. Suddenly she saw something shiny under the bed. Bending over, the girl did not understand why the syringe was lying under the bed. She looked into the box and froze. The girl remembered that her mother used this plant to administer medicine. The little girl did not understand why there were poisonous plants in the box. When the woman returned, a scattering of stars were already shining in the sky. The woman asked her daughter why she was not sleeping at such a late time. Ophelia handed her mother a syringe and asked her not to leave it anywhere. At that moment, the little girl convinced herself that it was just a misunderstanding. The girl knew very well that herbs can be not only poisonous but also medicinal. The baby's heart was beating out of her chest. Ophelia wanted her mother to say that this was not true. The woman asked to keep it a secret for her sake. The daughter could not refuse the beauty. The little girl knew very well that her mother always had the last word. Despite the fact that cats were scratching in the blonde's soul, she could not squeeze out a word. Ophelia knew that as long as her mother was happy, it meant everything would be fine. The thin girl convinced herself that her mother abandoned her father because they did not value women. In her childish head, this was the only explanation. She promised her mother that she would not tell anyone about this. The girl liked their quiet life. She never dreamed of anything more. The skinny girl's biggest dream remained a small house where the two of them could live. But unfortunately, a simple and quiet life was not enough for the woman. Soon after Cameron's funeral, the woman told her daughter that they were moving to the estate of Baroness Blanchet. The Baroness wanted to take a woman as a companion. Ophelia was surprised by the suddenness of this event. Smiling, the woman explained that the sooner they move there, the better it will be for the Baroness. As soon as Mother tasted the life of high society, she wanted more and more. A huge number of servants, sparkling jewelry, and a beautiful dress awaited them at Blanchet's mansion. Alas, this was not enough for my mother. She soon decided to change the title. The Baroness hospitably received Ophelia. The baby was very sweet to the woman. It was as if a stone fell in Ophelia's heart when she realized that her mother had again decided to take away an innocent life. Soon after their arrival, Baroness Blanchet began to feel unwell. Before her death, she asked a friend to take care of her husband. Unfortunately, Ophelia could not prevent the deterioration of her health. Even after the death of the Baroness, Ophelia did not even think about stopping her mother. After moving to the mansion, the baby began to show abilities. Seeing all the strength of her daughter, the woman hugged her tightly. The mother was glad that the girl made her life incredibly easier. She asked if her daughter knew how much she loved her. Ophelia replied that she also loved her mother. From that day on, the little girl became an accomplice. Baroness Blanchet loved the girl. But unfortunately, Ophelia could not protect the woman from her mother. The woman insisted on treating her friend herself. The Baroness was only glad to receive such help. When it became very difficult for the Baroness, she called the baby to her. Blanchet asked Ophelia not to be sad, because she was sure that nothing could be done about it. At that moment, the girl realized that she and her mother were murderers. She knew that there was no forgiveness for such terrible crimes. The death of the Baroness greatly unsettled the skinny woman. The little girl was worried about the Baron, who suddenly lost his wife. Ophelia thought everything as is typical for a man. But contrary to expectations, the Baron was not at all bothered by the death of his wife. The Baron walked around the garden and talked with the girl's mother. The man initially assumed that this would happen. Blanchet almost immediately proposed to his mother, as if a coin had been waiting for it. The girl's hand clenched when she saw their cheerful walk through the garden. Ophelia understood that even though their marriage with her previous wife was of convenience, it was still too much. After watching the Baron for a bit, the girl decided to retreat. The little girl understood that her mother would get rid of him as soon as she had enough of playing. A couple of years later, this is exactly what happened. Baron Blanchet died right in his mother's arms. The courtiers said that there was something unclean here. Many considered the woman a witch who took their husbands away from the world. It seemed to Ophelia that her mother was acting unreasonably, especially considering her previous husbands. After the funeral, the little girl understood that she needed to focus on eliminating all possible evidence. People began to suspect her mother more and more. The girl had to take care that not a trace was left behind the woman. Ophelia burned all things that could arouse suspicion. Over time, Ophelia stopped feeling even an ounce of regret over the lives lost. The thin girl convinced herself that the men followed her mother's lead of their own free will. When the little girl was getting rid of the evidence, a bundle of paper fell out of her pocket. The blonde froze tightly, clutching the hem of the red fabric. She saw a drawing that she had once drawn for the Baroness. For Ophelia, the death of Baroness Blanchet was completely different. The little girl tried to convince herself that the woman was the Baron's wife and nothing more, and died without doing anything wrong. Seeing the drawing, her hands trembled and tears welled up in her eyes. The death of this woman plunged Ophelia into remorse. The baby was very sad that her mother's desire to become a baroness ruined this compassionate woman. Most likely the Baroness understood where this was going. The woman saw how her husband looked at his mother. The little girl was wondering if the Baroness had noticed how her health had deteriorated sharply after our arrival. Perhaps the woman predicted her death. After Ophelia got rid of the evidence, she came to her mother for a prayer service in the church. The woman asked if her daughter had finished her work. Glancing nervously, the little girl suggested stopping this and living together as before. Ophelia explained that they now had a house and had plenty of money. The skinny woman suggested living without killing anyone at all. Hanging over her daughter, the woman asked what she was talking about. Smiling, Mother explained that she didn't understand her at all. Seeing this woman smile, the little girl knew what she meant. The mother looked at her daughter with her angelic gaze, as if not noticing the trail of deaths that was trailing behind her. At that moment, Ophelia realized that her mother had never felt remorse. There was no trace of regret in her mother's smile. Soon after the Count's death, Alex's father appeared in her life. He approached her to express his condolences. Duke Arpad was the man of Ophelia's mother's dreams. The man had untold wealth and outstanding appearance. With all this, he also belonged to a noble dynasty. Alex's father could give the woman everything she wanted. The closer Mother got to the Duke, the more Ophelia's heart broke from the inside. It seemed like a nightmare to the little girl that her mother was a murderer. Soon the girl began to waste away before her eyes, but she had to endure and find consolation for herself. Ophelia persistently searched for a box of poisonous herbs. The girl consoled herself that her mother would not abandon her. The little girl wanted to believe that her mother loved her and therefore would not kill her. Ophelia's soul was slowly fading away. When she met her older brother, She felt that his voice and gestures betrayed suspicion of her. On the first day of the meeting, the girl was struck by a cold look and unfriendly behavior. There was something bewitching about these habits for Ophelia, from which she could not take her eyes off. It seemed to the girls that Alexander did not accept her and completely ignored her. Every time they crossed paths, Ophelia felt Alex's suspicious gaze on her. But as soon as the blonde looked back, there was no one there. When the Duke showed the girl the library, the skinny girl almost immediately drowned in books. The girl wanted to hide in those fictional worlds. Gradually, Ophelia began to get used to life on the Arpad estate. Gradually, she felt how they became a family, similar to all the others. Fortunately, the skinny mother seemed happy here. Watching the woman's happiness, the daughter was finally able to calm down. But unfortunately for the girl, she found a syringe in the dressing room. The skinny girl couldn't believe it, because her mother promised her that it wouldn't happen again. At that moment, Ophelia realized that all the promises she made to her mother were lies. Until the morning, the girl searched the estate to get rid of all the syringes. The girl assumed that she had missed the syringe that her brother found. Alex asked the blonde why she cast a spell on the carriage. After all, the girl claimed that she burned all the syringes. Ophelia, clutching her dress with trembling hands, explained that she saw her mother in front of her brother's chambers. One day, the girl saw her mother at such a late hour near the door to Alex's room. But when her daughter asked what she was doing, the woman said that Alex was sick. Mom had a syringe in her hands. The blonde with angelic eyes explained that she had brought antibiotics for her adopted son. Ophelia asked her mother if this was why the woman asked her to bring water and honey to the guy. The woman smiled and explained that she was going to bed. At that terrible moment, the girl realized that her mother was back to her old ways. Ophelia could no longer justify her. The girl understood that they were in a God-forsaken place and there were too many witnesses. The skinny girl didn't want this, so she decided to stop her mother with her own hands. Ophelia realized that her mother was again intending to kill an innocent person. The girl couldn't understand how she could feed her lies. She went out into the yard and looked at the carriage that was getting ready to depart. Ophelia decided that if the woman did not want to listen to her advice, she decided to stop the woman by force. Duke Arpad didn't care much for the thin woman. The blonde understood that the Duke had already fallen into his mother's web. Ophelia knew very well that the man would have gone to his grave sooner or later. When the girl saw her mother going down to the carriage, she did not regret her decision. Very soon, the brother and sister were told the sad news. People talked back and forth, suggesting that the crew was poorly repaired or that everything was a setup. People reacted exactly as the girl expected. She knew that people would not allow the idea of her involvement. All everyone was talking about was that the weld had come apart. Fortunately, from the outside it looked like an ordinary accident. Only Ophelia knew the truth about what happened. Soon after the notification of the accident, the thought flashed through the girl's head that her mother was no longer alive. The girl realized that she had stained her hands with blood. From that moment, Ophelia began to regret what she had done. The girl felt like she should have just pretended she didn't see her mom that night. The girl thought about helping the woman accomplish her plan, but it was already too late. For a long time, thoughts flashed through the blonde's head that she should have followed her mother since she decided to kill her. Ophelia believed that she alone had the right to be with a woman. The girl could not stand life in the Arpad's house, where everything seemed to be saturated with the presence of her mother. For this reason, the girl wanted to leave the house immediately after the funeral. Alex gently took the girl by the trembling hand and asked where she intended to run. Tears appeared in the sister's eyes again, and she explained that she wanted to go to the Holy Empire. The skinny girl explained that she would gladly repent if she could thereby hear forgiveness of her mother's sins. After atonement for all her sins, Ophelia wanted to follow her mother. She wanted to climb that legendary staircase to the top. The girl planned this until Alex arrived. Seeing her brother's tears and reluctance to let her go, she decided to at least take responsibility for something. Ophelia didn't understand why she was so angry that her mother wanted to harm her brother. Because of this, the girl could not refuse Alex. The skinny girl was sure that during these 3 years until the guy became an adult, she was his guardian. Feeling a little sad, Ophelia said that she was unlucky with her brother's insight. The guy balanced between suspicion and indispensable kindness towards his sister. This one played on Ophelia's soul strings. As soon as the girl looked closely at her brother, she began to forget about the loss of someone close to her. Every day the girl became more and more attached to Alex, and the once dreary Arpad estate came to her liking when she began spending time with her brother. The skinny woman explained to the guy that everything was for his sake. Sighing with relief, Ophelia declared that she had expressed everything. To the surprise of the skinny woman, she somehow even felt better. In the silence of the night, the clock rang. Both realized that it was already midnight and the guy had become an adult. The blonde asked her brother if he remembered the promise he made to her 3 years ago. A little sadly, Ophelia realized that they could only part ways. The girl invited her brother to follow the investigators so that they could pick her up. The blonde suggested that the investigators had not yet left the village. Lowering his eyes, Alex asked if she was serious. Ophelia asked why she was joking. Finally, the girl approached her brother and congratulated him on his 20th birthday. She pressed her forehead to his head. When the girl headed towards the exit, Alex grabbed her wrist harshly. Her brother stopped her and explained that he had not let her go. The brunette explained that he could not allow this to happen. He pulled Ophelia closer to him. The girl explained that this would not change anything. Looking at her, the brother explained that she could think whatever she wanted. Alex didn't want the girl to leave. The brunette reminded his sister that Kane was dead, and the investigators left without suspicion. The guy explained to his sister that only 2 people in this house know her secret. Alex kissed her hand tenderly. He explained that since Kane crossed the threshold of the estate pretending to be an investigator, Alex wanted with all his might to remove the blonde from his sister's circle. He explained that for her sake he was ready to disobey the Emperor's decree. Ophelia explained to the brunette that she still wanted to repent to Kane. Shocked, Alex explained that this was exactly what he was afraid of. He was worried about the same thing when Henrietta died. At that moment, the guy didn't care who killed the maid. Alex saw this murder as another chance to lose his sister. Then the guy realized that the murder could be blamed on the deceased maid, since she herself confessed to everything. Ophelia reminded her brother that his father died at her hands. Hanging over his sister, Alex explained that he didn't care whether his father's girlfriend killed him or not. The blonde explained that she could take her brother's life the same way she did with his father. Smiling, Alex said that the girl was not a copy of her mother. Leaning towards the girl, the brunette explained that it would be an honor for him to die at her hands. Ophelia squeezed his jacket tightly and noticed that the guy was definitely crazy. He kissed his sister tenderly on the cheek, and he quietly whispered that he didn't mind saying goodbye to his mind for her sake. The guy asked how one could be sane when she was nearby. Holding Ophelia tightly to him, Alex asked her to never tell him that she would leave this estate. The guy reminded that his sister also knows very well how bitter it is to be alone. The girl muttered through her teeth how vile he was treating her. She didn't understand how her brother could say such words to a man who, in an effort not to be left alone, had clung to his mother's skirt all his life. Ophelia loved her mother very much, but she was also afraid of that woman more than anything else. The blonde always dreamed of always being by her side. Skinny was afraid that her mother had abandoned her just as she had abandoned all her many fathers, and the stubborn woman herself was like a butterfly. The sister explained to Alex that he would get tired of her clinginess and selfishness. She wanted to stay, but she was afraid that Alex would get tired of her company. The guy chuckled and replied that she was still worried about him. The brunette asked why he should be sorry. He admitted that when his older sister arrived in Arpad, Alex promised himself that he would never be separated from her. Smiling, the guy asked if she could stand it. Tears welled up in Ophelia's eyes, and she realized that it was too late to step back. Hugging Alex tightly around the neck, she told him that for his sake she could endure anything. Ophelia kissed the guy passionately, and she asked Alex to give her all of himself. Our heroine thought that at that hour when she arrived at the Arpad estate and met Alex, she herself felt that she was already destined by fate to never leave this house.